This man was convicted of slaughtering 7 individuals, including his own children. He still had the audacity to blow a kiss at the camera, as if nothing had happened. That eerie moment alone cements him as one of the most cold-blooded mass murderers in New Zealand's history, and his name is Raymond Wahia Radama, a man whose actions shook the peaceful town of Masterton, where people had believed they were safe. At that time, Masterton was a small, close-knit community celebrated for its rural charm. Situated in the Wairarapa region, the town was encircled by green farmland and rolling hills, creating a serene landscape. The local economy primarily relied on agriculture, particularly sheep farming, which was a leading industry. Many residents were employed in farming or related sectors, such as wool processing, small manufacturing, and retail. Life there moved at a slow and predictable pace. Violent crime was uncommon. Beneath the seemingly pleasant exterior, however, economic difficulties were beginning to emerge. In the early 1990s, New Zealand was dealing with the consequences of economic reforms from the previous decade. Many families, especially those in working-class areas like Masterton, were feeling the strain of increasing unemployment and financial insecurity. Job opportunities were limited, wages were low, and support from welfare programs was often insufficient. For someone like Radama, who was already struggling to support his family, these challenges only heightened his frustration and desperation. At 25, Radama and his wife, Toni, were overwhelmed by financial stress, making it difficult to keep up with rising rent costs. With 3 young children to care for, they had to move in with Toni's parents on Judd Street in Masterton. Living with extended family was challenging, the house was cramped, tensions were high. Arguments became more common, emotions flared, and resentment grew. Over the months, his frustration intensified, driven not only by financial difficulties but also by a sense of powerlessness and rejection as he watched his life fall apart. He sought help from social services in hopes of finding support and a way to recover, but the assistance he needed never materialized. Left alone with his despair, his feelings transformed into a deep, violent rage. By June, Radama's marriage had completely collapsed. A serious conflict involving Radama, his wife, and her family marked the final breaking point. He was expelled from their home, feeling rejected and isolated, with nowhere to turn for help. As he struggled with insomnia, wandered alone, consumed by anger and hopelessness, he reached a terrifying conclusion: if he couldn't have his family, then no one else would. On the night of June 26, 1992, Toni went out to meet her parents, Philip and Tubby Ferguson, at a local pub, leaving her 3 young sons, Karipi, Barney, and Stacy, with her sister, Nicola, 20. Also present in the house were Toni's brother, Philip Ferguson Jr., 14, Mikola's partner, Bevan Tepu, 21, and their young son, Stephen, 3. That night, Raymond Radama returned home armed with a knife and a softball bat. He violently attacked everyone inside, killing 7 people through stabbing and bludgeoning. Tragically, his own children were among the victims. In a disturbing move, he placed their bodies on his wife's bed and covered them with a Bible, as if seeking forgiveness. The bodies of the adults were also piled together in another bedroom, creating a horrifying scene that was difficult to comprehend. But Radama's bloodlust was not yet satisfied. He sat in the house, waiting for Toni and her parents to return so he could finish what he had started. When they finally walked through the door, the nightmare continued. Nicola's father, Philip, was the first to be attacked. Radama swung the softball bat with full force, striking him in a brutal assault. This time, however, things did not go according to plan. In the chaos, Toni managed to escape, running for her life to call for help. When the police arrived, the carnage they witnessed would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Blood soaked the floors, and lifeless bodies filled the rooms. In the midst of it all was Raymond Radama, subdued, and he was no longer in control. Toni's father, Philip, had overpowered him, preventing a greater tragedy. The news of the massacre spread like wildfire. New Zealand had never seen such a horrifying crime. A father, a husband, a son-in-law, someone who was supposed to protect his family, had instead wiped them out in cold blood. The community of Masterton was left reeling, struggling to understand how something so monstrous could have happened in their quiet town. Radama was arrested at the scene and taken into custody. His initial demeanor was eerily calm, as if he had accepted his fate. He offered little resistance, making no attempt to flee. During questioning, he showed minimal emotion, providing cold, matter-of-fact responses. Investigators were disturbed by his apparent lack of remorse. When Radama stood trial in 1993, the nation watched in shock. He expressed remorse, but the sheer brutality of his crimes left many wondering if it was genuine or merely an attempt to save himself from the harshest punishment. During the trial, the prosecution painted a picture of a man who had allowed his rage and feelings of inadequacy to fester for too long. The defense, on the other hand, argued that Radama had been pushed to his breaking point due to financial strain and rejection by his wife's family. Mental health professionals were brought in to assess his state of mind, but ultimately, the jury saw through any justifications. The judge described the killings as unimaginable. Radama was sentenced to life imprisonment for 7 counts of murder. Additionally, he was given 10 years for the killing of an unborn child and another 7 years for attempted murder. Even behind bars, the horror of what he had done did not fade. The parole board repeatedly denied his bids for release, citing his continued struggles with banned substance abuse. In 2008, the board noted that despite presenting himself as a reformed man in previous hearings, Radama had relapsed into cannabis use, blaming his actions on a dark day in his past. Year after year, Radama has stood before the parole board pleading for his release. He insists that he has changed, that he has grown, and that he is no longer the man he was when he committed those horrific crimes. Yet, each time, the board has denied his requests, stating the same concerns: his psychological state, his risk to society, and his lack of true remorse. It has now been more than 30 years since Radama was sentenced, and despite numerous parole hearings, the board remains unconvinced that he is fit to re-enter the world outside prison walls. Radama has been denied parole not just once or twice, but a total of 14 times. His repeated attempts to gain freedom have been met with the same result. His lawyer, Roger Eagles, has now taken a different approach, claiming that there is potential bias in the parole process. Eagles argues that one of the parole board members, Professor Phil Brynd, had previously prepared psychological reports on Radama in 1992, and his involvement in the current parole decisions could create an unfair assessment. He points out that Brynd is the only person on the board who has had extensive personal interaction with Radama, which could lead to preconceived judgments rather than an objective evaluation of Radama's progress over the past 3 decades. The legal challenge does not stop there. Eagles has also argued that Radama's repeated parole denials are evidence of bias. He claims that despite Radama undergoing rehabilitation programs and counseling, the board has never granted him a single opportunity for conditional release, raising concerns about whether he is being treated unfairly compared to other prisoners with similar convictions. However, the parole board has maintained its stance, insisting that every hearing is based on up-to-date psychological evaluations and risk assessments rather than relying on reports from the past. They argue that Radama's continued imprisonment is not the result of bias, but rather the outcome of his failure to meet the necessary criteria for release. Another point of contention in Radama's case is the way his parole hearings have been conducted. Eagles has argued that previous hearings have gone off track, with the board focusing too much on questioning Radama about his motivations for the crimes and the impact on his victims. He claims that the discussions have shifted from evaluating whether Radama is fit for release to revisiting his past, which should not be the central focus of the hearings. Eagles contends that while it is understandable for the board to consider the severity of Radama's crimes, parole decisions should be based on his rehabilitation and risk factors in the present, rather than continuously re-examining the past. In 2021, it was revealed that Radama had begun a relationship with a woman who had suffered childhood trauma. The board expressed concerns about this relationship, fearing that it could trigger another violent episode given Radama's history and the emotional volatility that played a role in his past actions. The board was deeply troubled by this revelation and questioned whether Radama was capable of forming healthy relationships, or if this new connection was a sign of unresolved psychological issues. Despite attending nearly 100 sessions with a psychologist, board members still believed Radama lacked insight into his crimes, which made them skeptical of his ability to maintain a stable and responsible relationship outside of prison. The concern was not just about Radama himself, but also about the potential harm that could come to his partner if he were released without proper safeguards in place. During one of his parole hearings, Radama made a statement that only reinforced the board's concerns. He claimed that he had loved his children and believed he was putting them in a better place by taking their lives. This statement sent chills down the spines of the parole board members, as it suggested that Radama still harbored a distorted sense of justification for his actions, rather than fully accepting the gravity of his crimes. His words implied that he had once rationalized these actions as an act of mercy. The board saw this as a major red flag, indicating that Radama had not yet reached a true understanding of his past actions or the level of self-awareness and accountability required for parole consideration. Despite these concerns, reports from inside the prison indicate that Radama has generally maintained good behavior. He has been described as respectful within the prison environment, and there have been positive reports about his work while incarcerated. Additionally, corrections officials have stated that there is no further need for additional rehabilitation programs, as Radama has already completed the necessary courses. However, even with these positive notes, the parole board has remained firm in its decision to keep him behind bars, stating that good behavior in a controlled environment does not necessarily translate to safe behavior in the outside world. In his most recent parole hearing in 2024, Radama made a significant admission. For the first time in over 3 decades, he acknowledged that the killings were intentional. This directly contradicted his previous claims. While this confession marked a departure from his earlier statements, it still failed to provide clarity on the most crucial question: why? Despite finally admitting his intent, Radama refused to explain his motives. During the hearing, he expressed deep regret, stating, "I was a very selfish man for what I did. All I can say is that I really regret wholeheartedly the decision that I made in order to kill all those many children and adults. I hate myself for what I've done." However, the parole board remained skeptical. They pointed out that his changing narrative over the years only raised further concerns about his credibility. Given his history of inconsistent explanations, the board questioned whether this newfound admission was genuine or simply another attempt to manipulate the system in his favor. The victims' families continue to oppose his release, maintaining that Radama has never fully explained his actions or shown true remorse to them. His admissions mean little without an honest, clear acknowledgement of why he did what he did. Many still believe that Radama poses a danger to society and should never be granted parole. In response to these concerns, the board recommended that Radama be transferred to a special treatment unit for violent offenders. However, he resisted the move, arguing that it would be a step backward in his rehabilitation rather than a constructive measure. Despite his efforts, the parole board once again denied Radama's release. The ruling made it clear that while his latest statement represented a shift, it was not enough to justify granting him freedom. The board emphasized that public safety remained their top priority and that Radama's risk factors had not diminished to a satisfactory level. For now, Raymond Wayne Radama remains in prison, and his next parole eligibility will come in April 2025. Whether he will finally succeed in persuading the board remains uncertain. However, given his long history of denied applications, changing statements, and ongoing concerns from the victims' families, his path to release remains as difficult as ever. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jennifer Levin. On August 26, 1986, around 6:15 a.m., a woman was cycling through Central Park when she spotted something in the grass that looked like a human body. As she got closer, she realized it was a girl's body and, in a panic, she ran to the nearest public phone to call 911. After a few minutes, the police were on the scene, but it was too late to save the girl. The sight of her lifeless body shocked everyone present. The girl's neck showed signs of strangulation, and her face was badly scratched. The police suspected a sexual motive behind the crime. The victim's identity was quickly established because she had an ID on her, she was Jennifer Levin, just 18 years old. Investigations into Jennifer's background revealed that she was both enterprising and humorous. Her parents had divorced when she was 5, and before starting school, she moved to Soho to live with her father, a renowned real estate agent. Although Jennifer was supposed to attend a high school in Manhattan, her father chose to send her to a prestigious private school instead. Jennifer is an excellent and intelligent student, well regarded by her classmates and teachers. Over time, she began to participate in vibrant activities at school and made friends with children whose parents were as wealthy as hers. She easily passed the advanced placement programs, designed to prepare students for prestigious universities like Yale and Harvard. Gradually, she has made new friends at private schools in New York and was invited to parties, expanding her social circle. Although Jennifer's friends lived scattered throughout the city, they all gathered in one atmospheric spot for parties. It was here that Jennifer met her first love, a guy named Dorian. However, their relationship ended quickly, so she soon began seeing another young man named Robert Chambers. He claimed to be the son of wealthy parents with their own country club. It wasn't until a year after their first meeting that they started dating. On August 25, 1986, Jennifer started university. However, her excitement was short-lived. By the morning of August 26, she was discovered lifeless in Central Park. What really happened to Jennifer there? Was she a random victim or did someone deliberately target her? As investigators considered the possibility that the incident was sexually motivated, they speculated that Jennifer may have been involved in prostitution. This could explain why she was in such a risky location at night. However, she comes from a rich family and she doesn't need the money, so she wouldn't do that. Also, her relatives denied this. During this time, crime in New York has increased. Among the thousands of murders that take place each year, Jennifer's case stands out and attracts great public attention. The police faced immense pressure because she belonged to a well-respected, wealthy family. Detectives initially suspected a maniac was responsible. At first, it appeared that this was a case of rape, but experienced detectives noticed clues suggesting a staged crime. The body appeared to be in an unusual position, as if caused by sexual violence. However, there were inconsistencies, such as underwear being missing but later found 100 meters away. The detective's suspicions were quickly validated. Forensic analysis found no male DNA, indicating that rape hadn't occurred. The case drew intense media attention, leading to journalists swarming the park. Details of the case were leaked to the media and detectives' theories immediately made headlines. This information is often distorted and comes with falsehoods and rumors. The police successfully kept the victim's name confidential long enough to avoid disrupting the investigation. When Jennifer's mother learned of the incident, she hurried to Central Park and was confronted with her worst fear: her daughter had died. During that tragic moment, reporters surrounded she and continuously asked her questions. Soon after, friends and other family members of Jennifer arrived. And Jennifer's father informed her classmates about the tragedy. Jennifer's family and friends provided the police with crucial information to aid the investigation. It was discovered that the night before her murder, Jennifer planned to spend time with 2 friends. Her father had given her a diary where she noted her upcoming plans, helping to trace the incident leading to the brutal murder. The primary suspect was Jennifer's ex-boyfriend, Dorian, whom she had recently broken up with. He is believed to have held a grudge against her, which may have been the motive for the murder. It was revealed that he had met Jennifer at a Mexican restaurant the evening before the crime. At that time, there were no social networks, mobile phones, or computers to enable rapid information exchange. Detectives gathered information very slowly. They learned that starting at 2:30 a.m., Jennifer was at a bar with the boyfriends of 2 friends. Around 3:45, one friend left, and shortly after, the other went home. Just before this, Robert arrived at the bar. Jennifer started paying attention to him, and they stayed together until the party ended. Robert was the last person to see her alive. Detectives went to question Robert, who was a 19 years old living near Central Park. They immediately noticed scratches on his face, and this seemed suspicious. He claimed a cat had caused, but no one believed him. When told that his girlfriend, Jennifer, was dead, he seemed shocked and genuinely worried. He cooperated with the investigation and began answering questions. Robert met Jennifer at the bar party around 3 a.m. They talked about her going to university. As the party was winding down and people started leaving, he and she stayed until around 4 a.m. They then left the bar, said goodbye, and headed home separately. Robert claimed he didn't know what happened afterward and denied involvement in Jennifer's death. She was killed between 4 o'clock and 6 a.m., and a forensic expert later confirmed her death likely occurred around 5:30. Investigators suspect Robert because he was the last person Jennifer was with, and the scratches on his face suggested a struggle. As a result, Robert became the primary suspect. Detectives tried to catch Robert in a lie, but he kept repeating his story like it was rehearsed. The interrogation lasted nearly 12 hours until Robert made a slip and slightly altered his account. This helped investigators get the necessary information they were looking for. They succeeded in getting Robert to confess, which happened under the watchful media presence, with reporters listening from the next room. Less than 24 hours after Jennifer Levin's body was found, Robert Chambers confessed to her manslaughter. According to Robert, he took a walk with Jennifer that night in Central Park. However, during the walk, she attacked him and attempted to have sex without his consent. She tied his hands with her underwear. The girl was very passionate and liked to experiment. Then, she scratched him and grabbed his genitals, causing him to scream and ask her to stop. Robert claims that she only increased the pressure instead of stopping. This story seemed so unbelievable that it made the detectives laugh and also brought shocked reactions from journalists. Robert says he was forced to defend himself due to Jennifer's aggressive actions. He managed to free his hands and, attempting to push her away, hit her with great force unintentionally. She hit a tree, then she fell down and died. He kept calling her to wake up, but she showed no response or signs of life. Not wanting to touch her, he sat next to a crowbar and waited, hoping she would wake up, but she never did. Eventually, he left the scene and observed from a distance as the police arrived. Robert insisted he was not guilty. He claimed he acted in self-defense against Jennifer's aggression. He expressed that he had no intention to harm her, as he really liked her. The investigators questioning why he didn't call for help. They believe if she had received medical help sooner, she might have survived. Robert explained that he feared being arrested. Following his interrogation, he was charged with murder. His family quickly hired a prominent lawyer, Jack Littman, who immediately petitioned the judge for Robert's release. The lawyer argued that Robert was innocent and that his actions were self-defense. The lawyer Jack portrayed Jennifer as a slut, who lured Robert into a trap and tried to rape him, and he was simply defending himself. Jack argued that Jennifer injured Roberts and she coincidentally died during his self-defense. This unusual defense strategy captured public attention. New York's media and information boards were filled with sensational headlines discussing the case. However, there were supporters of Jennifer as well. They viewed he as a decent, handsome, and successful. Robert was considered an intelligent and promising young man. He was a devout Irish Catholic and could not have deliberately committed such a heinous crime, as it would have destroyed his perfect life. Outwardly, he seems incapable of killing. Many people wondered why Robert, an attractive young man, would force a girl to have sex, since he was famous and had a lot of female attention. Robert's lawyer, Jack, tried his best to keep him from being held responsible for the murder. Jack even managed to get he featured on the cover of several magazines, such as New York Magazine. He appeared in a blue suit and red tie, resembling a fashion model rather than a dangerous criminal. Meanwhile, Robert actively smeared Jennifer's reputation, and this strategy was so effective that many people developed a biased view against his. Gradually, all media and the public sided with the defense. They believe that Jennifer is a woman with an evil personality. After meeting Robert, she went to Central Park to have sex with him and attacked him. However, a group of city volunteers specializing in crime prevention and many others strongly opposed it. They realized that Robert's lawyer was lying. They were furious with the lawyer. Besides, they also accused Robert of tarnishing Jennifer's reputation. Despite this, the public accepted the lawyer's lie, and Robert's supporters actively spread rumors that Jennifer was reckless and promiscuous. This made it possible for Robert to be released on bail. The lawyers then developed a more plausible version of incident, yet continued to defame Jennifer. They argued that Jennifer liked rough sex and accidentally died in the meantime, claiming the encounter began consensually and ended tragically by accident. This story gained unexpected support when Jennifer's father submitted her diary to the media. It was rumored to document her sexual relationships in detail. Later, the media has hyped it up as a sex diary, though it only described relationships with a few individuals, lacking any explicit or provocative content. Despite this, the diary entries were ruled inadmissible, which had already harmed Jennifer's reputation. The prosecutor's office had difficulty formulating a strategy and grasping the engine of this challenging case. Why did a boy from a wealthy family commit murder? A significant step in addressing this was analyzing Robert's past. Although only 19 years old, but he had committed over 3 burglaries, targeting wealthy homes in prestigious areas. His life was not as ideal as he portrayed. His mother not wealthy, she worked as a nurse in a private clinic and spent all her free time working to earn money. Without a source of income, Robert turned to crime and theft to maintain the image of a well-off young man and to support his drug addiction. He had been using drugs since he was 14 and had undergone several treatments, but none were successful. Robert struggled to graduate high school and later entered college, but he to be expelled due to substance issues and poor academic performance. He then attended Boston University, but faced similar problems. Many people knew he as an addict with a reputation for being dangerous. Jennifer had planned to break up with Roberts, and that might have been what led to the incident at the bar that night. One of Jennifer's friends reported seeing Robert searching through her purse. He attempted to steal $40 and became angry when questioned by her. She was appalled at how low he had fallen. This occurred shortly before she was discovered dead in the park. The investigation confirmed that her expensive earrings had been stolen. True to the nature of someone with an addiction, he simply removed the jewelry after the murder and sold it to buy drugs. Nonetheless, there was a chance that the hearings might not consider his criminal past. A year after the murder, headlines about Jennifer's brutal murder in New York Central Park were still in the newspapers. Finding 12 jurors who are not familiar with the case, are fair, and can render a correct verdict is a difficult task. They had to vet 486 people to find the required number of jurors. On the trial day, dozens of reporters were in the courtroom. Robert maintained his story about a genital attack and blamed Jennifer. He claiming he acted in self-defense and he just accidentally caused her death. However, experts have pointed out that Jennifer had marks on her neck, indicating that she had been in a violent and prolonged struggle. Numerous injuries indicated she fought against being strangled. The deep scratches on Robert's face were caused by her while fighting back. For a month, the case was highly contentious. Witnesses gave conflicting information, creating many doubts and questions, leading the jury to deliberate. Ultimately, They have fallen into a deadlock, and the possibility that Robert would escape punishment. On the 9th day, it was decided to annul the trial results and declare a mistrial. The prosecution's only hope was a plea deal. Robert was offered to plead guilty to manslaughter, and eventually, he accepted. On March 25, 1988, in court, Robert expressed remorse. He admitted guilt for a lesser crime and apologized to Jennifer's family and friends for the suffering he caused. Consequently, he received a lenient sentence of 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. Before the sentencing, Robert was released on bail, during which he held a farewell party. A girl at the party captured the event on a video camera. During the party, he got drunk, and he too confessed to the crime on camera, showing no remorse and even making jokes about the incident. Once in prison, Robert immediately became a troublemaker. He participated in assaults and repeatedly violated rules related to weapons and prohibited substances. As a result, his requests for parole were denied, and he served the entire 15-year sentence. Robert was released in 2003. Subsequently, Jennifer's family filed a civil lawsuit against Robert. They won the case, with the court ordering Robert to pay the family $25 million. However, it is unlikely they will receive this money because Robert lacks the funds. Robert remained silent about the incident that tragic night. However, in 2003, he spoke to the media for the first time. He seemed weighed down by guilt over killing a young student. He viewed this interview as a chance to unburden himself. He wished to speak out. He discussed the victim, Jennifer Levin, claiming he thought about her daily. The interview lasted 4 hours, with tension high throughout. Robert acknowledged that he could never make up for the pain he caused the Jennifer family. He realized that not only did he take their daughter away from her parents and friends, but he also created a web of lies. Despite this, he did not see himself as a monster because he felt remorse. Robert believed that if he were truly a monster, he would feel nothing. He admitted he was foolish and made the biggest mistake of his life. He recognized that stupidity often accompanied his actions. Although he was a criminal, but Robert did not seek forgiveness from the public because he believed it was impossible. However, he wanted to apologize and find a way to back up his words. For the past 15 years, Robert has been imprisoned, he believing this has atoned for his guilt. He admitted he was genuinely afraid, partly because he had to speak to the media. Nevertheless, he chose to speak because he felt it was his duty. After Robert was released from prison, he really wanted to make up for his mistakes. However, after missing out on major social changes during his incarceration, he had a hard time starting over. His lack of understanding about responsibility had contributed to the tragic death of Jennifer, a young woman. In an interview, he admitted that responsibility is now a key focus in his life. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Scarlett Keeling. Scarlett Keeling was born in July 1992 in Great Britain. Her mother, Fiona, has 9 children from 5 different men. However, none of the men among them care about the lives of Fiona and children. The family relied primarily on state benefits for support, and Fiona also worked part-time. The children were homeschooled and lived in a poor area of Devon, UK. They live in a small house and some trailers. Fiona's first child was a boy named Hallandale Moose, who was 19 years old. Next is Silas, 17 years old, and then Scarlett, 15 years old. These 3 children were from Richard Keeling, who was of Levitsa descent and worked in a construction company. When Fiona and Richard's relationship began, they lived near each other in Hartford, but they separated shortly after Scarlett's birth. 2 girls, Marilyn and Kitty, were born a little over a year apart. At the time of the tragedy, Marilyn was 13 years old and Kitty was 12. Their father, Chris Osborne, was a trader. However, Fiona and Chris' relationship quickly ended. After them, 2 more children were born, AK and K, who was 9 at the time of the tragedy. Their biological father was Paul, a market trader. He met Fiona while she was trading in London. At that time, she was selling army equipment. Her relationship with Paul was brief, but it was he who took her to the Devon area. Devon has more spacious properties, suitable for Fiona's large family. She hoped to create a better environment for her children. However, her relationship with Paul quickly began to deteriorate after the move. They had frequent disagreements and serious conflicts, yet they continued living together to avoid paying rent. Eventually, they were evicted, which marked the end of their relationship. During this time, Fiona met Adam Foster, a contractor who specialized in flooring. He was the father of her last 2 children, Trinity and Aurora. They were born a year apart. But Fiona and Adam's relationship didn't last long. The large family had to squeeze into a small apartment provided by the state. Fiona found herself alone and had to take care of 9 children by herself. Most of the time, she homeschooled them. However, sometimes they start attending public schools when their family circumstances become more favorable. During this period, the Keeling family was described as decent and polite, showing no signs that their mother mistreated them. As the teenagers grew up, their living conditions were challenging. Fiona did her best to provide for them, but raising 9 children on her own was nearly impossible. She also faced problems with alcohol and substance addiction, although she tried to protect her children from these harmful habits. Unfortunately, they lived in marginal areas where drug use was common, and this environment negatively influenced her children. Scarlett grows up and gradually becomes interested in the more rebellious aspects of life. Fiona was aware that Scarlett had smoked weed several times. Some of Scarlett's friends have mentioned that she has been attending parties with untrustworthy friends. She frequently smoked and drank alcohol. Her mother, Fiona, noted that she appeared older than her age. By 14, she had started dating boys. Upon discovering this, Fiona advised that she should buy birth control pills, as Fiona wanted to protect her children from potential troubles and early pregnancies. Scarlett was described by her relatives as an active and cheerful girl who was beautiful and drew a lot of attention. She had a passion for horses and swimming. She also dreamed of joining a group of artists to pursue creative work. In 2006, Fiona began a relationship with Rob Clark, a man who was wealthier than her previous partners. A year later, they started planning a trip to India with the children, specifically to the famous resort of Goa, which they had long wanted to visit. Rob had been to Goa many times and loved it. For Fiona, this trip will be very interesting, as she had never traveled outside the UK. The trip promised to be a significant experience for the entire family. However, she hesitated for a long time. She worried not only about the trip but also about the large amount of money that needs to be spent. Her eldest son chose to remain in Britain due to document issues. She didn't want to rely entirely on Rob, so she decided to contribute to the trip costs herself. She used her savings, sold some belongings, and also drew from her benefits. After much preparation, packing, and financial planning, the family was finally ready and very excited about their upcoming adventure. The trip started in November 2007. Rob, Fiona, and 8 children visited Anjuna in Goa. This was the first destination on their itinerary. Anjuna is a peaceful coastal town known for its beautiful beaches and rich hippie culture. The area also hosts large parties at numerous clubs, creating a relaxed atmosphere with plenty of entertainment options. At first, they enjoyed the warm weather, the ocean, and the laid-back lifestyle. However, by early February, they grew tired of the constant noise and parties in Anjuna and wanted to explore other regions of India. Everyone agreed to move on, except for Scarlett. During her time in Anjuna, she met Julio Lobo, a local guide who organized excursions. Then, they quickly became a friend. She helped promote his activities by distributing flyers and accompanied him on trips as an assistant. She even considered staying behind to continue this work and enjoy her time on the beach, but Fiona disagreed with her decision. Nevertheless, Scarlett knew how to persuade Fiona that this would be a positive experience. She would learn to be independent, enjoy a break, and work to earn some money. Fiona then agreed to let her stay with her friend Julio. She promised to attend fewer parties and avoid going out alone at night. With this resolved, Fiona, Rob, and the 7 other children set off on a tour to different cities. In fact, India is often ranked as one of the most dangerous countries. Numerous crimes occur here, especially against women, making it very risky for a girl to be alone. In early February 2008, the Keeling family was faced with a tragic incident. In mid-February, their eldest son, 19 years old Hallandale, was hit by a car while crossing the street in the UK. He was taken to the hospital with serious injuries. Upon hearing the news, Fiona and the rest of the Keeling family began making plans to return home to support him. On February 17th, Scarlett met with her family and began packing. During this time, she had expressed a desire to attend a party for St. Lee's Day. Although her mother was against it, but she managed to persuade her to let her go. She told her mother she would return by midnight after saying goodbye to her friends. After her mother agreed, she left the house with Julio. Her mother, unaware that this would be the last time she would see her daughter and that the party would lead to a tragic outcome. Until that moment, Scarlett's life on the coast followed a typical daily routine. She distributed leaflets for Julio and sometimes acted as his guide. She also served food and worked part-time on the beach. In the evenings, the party scene began. The 15-year-old girl, Scarlett, having earned some money, went out to enjoy herself. She attended the party until midnight, then she went back to Julio's aunt's house, where he was living. She quickly adapted to this lively lifestyle. She seemed happy and didn't want to leave. However, her plans changed when she realized her older brother, Hallandale, needed help. She couldn't abandon him in his time of trouble, so she decided to return to her family. Despite this, she chose to enjoy one last night out. Julio, feeling tired and unwell, decided to stay home. But Scarlett went out with Julio's 16-year-old sister and their friend Ruby for one final party before their vacation ended. Scarlett admitted to having a romantic relationship with Julio. He had even bought her a motorcycle. This revelation surprised Ruby, especially since Scarlett had just turned 15 and Julio was 10 years older. They visited a local bar and then moved to several other places, drinking moderately at each one. After midnight, they planned to head home. Scarlett, however, intended to return to her family rather than stay at Ruby's house, as her family had already come back for her. They chatted a bit longer and say goodbye, promising to keep in touch after Scarlett returned to Great Britain. Scarlett also planned to visit the resort again in the future to see her friends. Unfortunately, this plan was never realized, as no one ever saw her alive again. Scarlett never returned home, and at that time, no one was looking for her. Her mother, Fiona, thought she would return to Julio in the morning. However, she was still missing the next day. On February 18, 2008, the morning after the party, passers-by discovered the half-naked body of a girl on the beach. They quickly notified the police, who identified the deceased as a 15-year-old girl. Fiona has been facing depression because of the health situation of her son, Hallandale. Overwhelmed with horror, Fiona regained her composure and rushed to the scene of the tragedy. During the initial investigation, police stated that the body was found floating in the water, leading them to conclude that the cause of death was accidental drowning. However, there were clear signs of violence and abuse on the body. Despite this evidence, law enforcement in India believed she had gotten drunk on the beach, fallen asleep, and drowned. Naturally, Fiona protested this conclusion and was determined to seek justice. Fiona spent weeks searching for answers to prompt an investigation and review of the case. She even took photographs of Scarlett's body at the morgue to record evidence, fearing that the incident would be covered up. The police insisted it was an accident and seemed more focused on minimizing the incident to avoid scaring off tourists and damaging the resort's reputation. Fiona believes that the numerous bruises and severe injuries on Scarlett's body indicate that she died as a result of violence. She was also certain that her daughter had been raped. However, the investigators explained the missing clothing by saying it had been washed away by the waves. The police attributed the bruises on Scarlett's head to her hitting rocks underwater. It seemed the authorities had not thoroughly looked for her belongings. After speaking with several witnesses and examining the area where Scarlett was found, Fiona surprisingly discovered evidence that the police had overlooked. Specifically, she found several pieces of Scarlett's clothing hidden in the bushes nearby on the beach. The second investigation, along with a toxicology test, took place a month after Scarlett's death. By the end of the year, analysis showed that her system contained alcohol and drugs. Furthermore, she had over 50 violent injuries, including cuts and bruises, indicating a violent cause of death. The amount of water found in her lungs was too low to conclude that she died by drowning. It seemed more likely that the water entered her lungs after death, possibly while attempts were made to dispose of her body. A detailed toxicology analysis of the blood revealed the presence of both mild and severe prohibited substances. This makes one wonder how these substances could have entered her body if, according to relatives, she only smoked. Interviews with witnesses helped investigators piece together the incident of that tragic night when Scarlett left her friend Ruby. They spoke to a witness named Mike. He was from London and was on holiday in Goa. He reported seeing Scarlett around 3 a.m. as she entered the bar. She was very drunk, walked unsteadily, and incoherent speech. She fell in front of the entrance, and others helped her get up. She quickly attracted the attention of several men, but the bar owner prevented anyone from approaching her. Later, she went to the back of the kitchen, and she spoke with two Indian men for about an hour. Mike believed she knew them, and he suspected that she was drinking and possibly using drugs during that time. Mike is aware that this beach is dangerous because of the high number of sexual assaults and the increase in gang activity. Although drug sales were illegal, drugs were readily available in many places. A witness reported seeing Scarlett leave the bar with a local man around 4:30 a.m. When Mike left the bar about half an hour later, he noticed the man pulling Scarlett into the bushes. Since she did not resist or scream, Mike assumed they were consenting to have sex, so he did not intervene and left the scene. Based on this information, the police arrested two employees of the bar, Samson de Souza and Solani Plato Carvalho, on March 2, 2008, on suspicion of murder. On June 5, the case was handed over to the Central Bureau of Investigation. Samson and Solani were charged with murder, rape, drug use, and cruelty to a minor. Additional charges for attempting to destroy evidence were later added. Unfortunately, the Indian justice system moved slowly, and the trial in Goa was not scheduled until March 2010. 2 years later. During this time, preparations for the trial continued, and law enforcement interviewed 72 witnesses. However, just days before the trial was set to begin, the case was unexpectedly suspended. Samson and Solani still maintain that they had nothing to do with Scarlett's death, and there is currently no direct evidence against them. All evidence has been destroyed. The prosecutor's office to continue contacting witnesses. By 2013, they had selected 30 individuals who could help clarify the timeline of incident from that tragic night. The most important witness in this case is Mike, who witnessed the violence against Scarlett, but he did not realize it was happening against her will. Unfortunately, in April 2012, he refused to return to testify in court. Later, he told the media that he was afraid to come back to the country where the crime occurred because he feared for his safety, he believing that local gangs were involved. There were rumors that Mike had been threatened, and the Indian authorities even opened a criminal case against him regarding what he witnessed that night. However, his testimony was deemed unreliable. Fiona was shocked by Mike's behavior and labeled him a coward. Fiona believed that he could have saved Scarlett when he saw her being dragged into the bushes or helped bring the perpetrators to justice. However, he chose not to do so. She was so heartbroken, she even tried to meet Mike in England and take a video as evidence in court, but her efforts were unsuccessful. The police appear to be obstructing the pursuit of justice. They are still looking for reasons to blame Scarlett for the death. For instance, they pointed to her diary entries where she expressed her desire to leave Njuna and return home. The detectives interpreted this as a sign of depression, hinting that she is trying to stay away from life. This thing seemed aimed at closing the case, despite the fact that Scarlett had never shown any signs of mental health issues or intent to end her life. The hearings were delayed for 8 years, during which Fiona was constantly in the media spotlight. She had to address numerous rumors and gossip. On September 23, 2016, Samson and Solani were acquitted due to insufficient evidence. Fiona was present during the sentencing and was devastated by the court's decision. After years of waiting, Samson and Solani were found not guilty. Fiona accused the police of corruption and she planned to take the case to higher courts. She vowed to keep fighting for justice for her deceased daughter, Scarlett. Attorneys representing Samson and Solani argued that from the outset, the Central Bureau of Investigation lacked evidence. They maintained that Scarlett's death was either a voluntary end to her life or an accident. However, the medical evidence that showed she had 52 injuries, most of which she could not have inflicted on herself. The defense claimed that no one had given the girl illegal drugs, rather, she had taken them on her own. Fiona felt a deep sense of injustice. Fiona had to wait 4 years to retrieve Scarlett's body and give her a proper burial. Fiona hoped for a fair court ruling. It felt as though she had lost, and she returned to the UK unexpectedly. In February 2017, the court's decision was appealed. It was demonstrated that the judge failed to comply with the deadlines for hearings. As a result, both suspects, Samson and Solani, were once again under investigation. The prosecutor's office in Njuna began investigating the possibility that Samson and Solani deliberately administered drugs and alcohol to Scarlett in an attempt to rape her. During the hearing, a witness stated that at about 3 a.m., she saw Scarlett trying to get a ride, maybe to go home. However, none of the drivers stopped for her. She then went to a beach bar, where Samson and Solani had promised to give her a ride after their shift ended at 5 a.m. She decided to wait for them there. It is believed that Samson slipped some narcotic into her drink so that he could easily rape her. Further investigation revealed that Samson was involved in the illegal drug trade on the beach, which meant he was always carrying drugs. During the hearings, his defense lawyer denied that Samson had any involvement in the murder, arguing that it was an accident. The lawyer tried to undermine the prosecution's case, but by then, the police had gathered enough testimony and evidence to implicate Samson in the brutal killing of Scarlett. The defense attorney successfully demonstrated that Solani was not guilty. He had a lot of communication with Scarlett that evening, but he left on his scooter before she departed with Samson. Therefore, Solani's charges were dropped, leading to his acquittal. In contrast, Samson faced a more serious outcome. On July 19, 2019, the Supreme Court of Bam convicted Samson D'Souza on 5 charges, including premeditated murder, rape, inciting Scarlett, a teenager, to use hard drugs, and attempting to conceal evidence of murder. Finally, Fiona found justice after nearly 11 years of unremitting efforts. But the outcome was disappointing. Samson received a sentence of only 10 years in prison for his heinous crimes, which many felt was too lenient. Despite this, Fiona was relieved that her efforts were not in vain and that the criminal faced some punishment for his actions. After 11 years, Samson still maintains his innocence, despite the court's decision. Fiona not only sought justice for Scarlett's murder but also faced scrutiny from the courts and child protection services. There was even talk of removing her custody of all her children, labeling her as a neglectful mother. However, this is not the biggest problem for the family. Tragically, before Samson's final trial, Fiona's eldest son, Hallandale Keeling, died after taking a massive dose of morphine. Fiona explained that Hallandale was very close to his younger sister Scarlett and couldn't cope with her rape and murder. He had felt guilty for not traveling to India with his family and believed he could have protected Scarlett. Additionally, he was also very sad that his sister's killer had not been punished for such a long time. Scarlett's reputation was severely damaged because of Rob. He provided information that contradicted Fiona's account. He claimed that by the second month in Goa, Scarlett had spent all her money on drugs and alcohol, forcing him and her family to survive on just one bowl of rice a day. Rob alleged that she used drugs openly in front of her family and that Julio had attempted to forcibly take her just days after they arrived at another beach. He suggested that Fiona allowed this because she could receive money for Scarlett, implying that Fiona had abandoned her. Fiona, however, vigorously rejected these claims, insisting they were mere rumors. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Amy Fisher. Amy Fisher was born on August 21, 1974, in New York, USA. She is the only child in her family. Amy has a rather shy and modest personality. Amy often feels lonely. Although her parents provided her with everything she wanted, because they worked long hours and had little time for her. Therefore, she formed a close relationship with her grandmother and aunt. Her father was strict and harsh, often punishing both his wife and daughter for any mistakes, which made Amy afraid of him. There were many arguments between her parents, and each time, Amy hoped they would lead to divorce. However, her father was a skillful manipulator who controlled her mother, making her too afraid to leave the marriage. At a young age, Amy suffered a traumatic experience when she was raped by a family friend when she was just 6 years old. She kept this abuse a secret. When she was 13, Amy was raped again, this time by a worker hired to fix her family's house. And once again, she chose not to speak about it. These experiences left her with deep psychological scars. Despite this trauma, Amy tried to lead a normal teenage life. She had a close group of friends and a beloved dog that she spent time with every day. During this time, she dreamed of going to college to become a fashion designer. In February 1991, after an argument over the phone with her mother about spending the night at a friend's house, Amy ran away from home. During the argument, her father took the phone and warned her that if she came home late, he would punish her. This caused Amy to not return home, and she spent several days sleeping at various friends' houses and at her aunt and grandmother's. She was afraid to return because of her father's threats. Meanwhile, her father reported her missing to the police, saying that she was unstable and uncontrollable. That same year, the girl discovered she was pregnant, which shocked both her and her boyfriend. Fortunately, her aunt helped her arrange an abortion without her parents finding out. In May, when she left the garage, she accidentally broke the side mirror of her car. She feared that her father would punish her for this incident. She had previously taken her car to a repair shop to fix a similar problem, where a skilled mechanic quickly fixed the car without her father noticing. This time, she returned to the shop alone and met a man named Jody Buttafoco. This meeting was the fate of her life. Joey was married to Mary Jo, the oldest of 5 sisters from a Catholic family in a Long Island suburb. They met in 1971 while both were in high school and taking summer courses. Joey was charming and funny, but he had lost his mother when he was 11, which left him deeply affected during his teenage years. Mary provided him with support during this difficult time. Their relationship developed quickly, and they married in 1977, purchasing a house next to his family's auto repair shop. Mary's lifestyle changed dramatically when she became pregnant. Mary began to accept a more responsible adult life. And she noticed that Joey had not changed. While she was at home, Joey continued to go to parties as usual. Mary did not confront him about this, hoping that he would eventually change. However, this situation made her frustrated because of Joey's needs and desires. He became addicted to drugs, went to work early and came home late, sometimes disappearing for days. Each time he returned, he had a convincing excuse, because he was very good at lying. Mary endured this situation for a long time, rarely seeing her husband, and her patience was exhausted. She began to talk about divorce more often, but Joey always tried to ease her worries. And then she went on to get pregnant again. After giving birth to her daughter Jessica, she tried her best to maintain the appearance of an ideal family. Meanwhile, Joey continued his reckless behavior. This made Mary feel sad and made her see herself as a failure. As a result, she began to experience frequent panic attacks. Mary began seeing a therapist who helped her control her anxiety. However, this did not solve the problem of her uncontrollable husband. Faced with this reality, Mary had no choice but to take prescription medication, raise her child, and hope for a future where Joey would change. Mary gradually realized that they needed to move back to their old neighborhood on Long Island, as Joey's parties and friends were having a negative effect on him. She convinced Joey that they needed to move. The couple planned to buy a new house. Much to Mary's surprise, her husband quickly found a cash buyer for their current home, making it seem like a great opportunity. They could move immediately, and Mary expected to receive the money to buy a new house. However, on the day they were due to leave, Joey admitted to a serious problem. He revealed that he had mortgaged their property and given all the money to his drug dealer. It turned out that he was heavily in debt due to his drug use and had to mortgage the house just to pay off the debt. This news was quite distressing. A family with 2 children found themselves homeless and broke. Fortunately, Joey's father stepped in to help by giving them the money they needed for a down payment on a new home in Massapequa, a suburb of Long Island. However, he had his own motives. He believed Joey was incapable of managing a business and feared he would lose the auto repair shop. As a result, Joey received the money, but he also lost his claim to the family business and became just an employee in his father's shop. Despite this, Mary remained supportive and forgave her husband. She enrolled him in a rehabilitation program, which ultimately helped him. In the end, they were able to find happiness together. The Mary never expected that another woman would enter their lives. In May 1991, Amy Fisher returned to the auto repair shop to fix her car, just like she had done the previous year. She was worried about her father finding out because she didn't have any money, so she needed to come up with a story. Joey agreed to help her with this. They decided he would say she brought the car in for routine maintenance, and that while she was there, someone had hit her car at night and broken the mirror. The plan worked. Amy's father believed the story, and Amy felt grateful to Joey for helping her avoid trouble with her dad. From that point on, Amy frequently brought her car to the shop for minor repairs, which she pretended were her fault, just to see Joey more often. Amy was much younger than Joey, with an age gap of almost 20 years. However, she often flirted with Joey. On July 2nd, she went to the auto repair shop again to install a sound system. Because her father could not take her home after leaving the car there for several hours. Then Joey offered to drive Amy home himself, and she agreed. When they arrived at her house, he asked if she could show him around, and she agreed. They had sex for the first time at her parents' house. After that experience, the girl began to consider Joey her boyfriend. They met again that night. Even though she was only 16 and he was 35, they began their relationship. Amy and Joey's relationship continued over the next few years. Amy would frequently visit Joey's auto repair shop, and they would meet at a motel and at her house. Joey seemed to be taking advantage of Amy's weaknesses. He knew about her troubled relationship with her father and realized how vulnerable she was. He began buying her expensive gifts and taking her out to dinner and on his boat. Amy was very fond of Joey, and their age difference did not bother her. Amy finally turned 17 on August 21, 1991. A month after her birthday, she approached Joey for financial help. By that time, Joey had lost his management position at the shop and could not give her the money she needed. Joey then suggested that she could make money by selling her body, and she agreed to become a call girl. Over time, Amy met other men, but her relationship with Joey continued. Their relationship was unhealthy, and it was clear that it would not end well. Just before the tragic events, Joey pressured her to cut ties with her aunt, one of the few supportive family members. Amy agreed and ended up without any support from her family. Amy urged Joey to leave his wife. However, Joey refused. Despite his relationship with Amy, Joey still loved Mary deeply and had no intention of leaving family. This revelation came as a significant shock to Amy. At the time, she decided to end all contact with him, but she struggled with her feelings and ultimately chose to stay in his life. During this time, Joey frequently expressed that his marriage was deteriorating. He mentioned having deep feelings for Amy and even mentioned wanting Mary dead. According to him, he had caught Mary cheating on him multiple times, and he described her behavior as unbearable, saying that she had tormented him throughout their marriage. Joey often made excuses for why he couldn't file for divorce, with the couple's children being the main reason. Amy believed him and felt sympathy for his situation. Over time, these lies began to influence Amy's thoughts, leading her to devise a murder plan. She intended for Mary to be shot, believing this would allow Joey to be free of his wife. Initially, Amy attempted to hire 2 of her classmates to carry out the murder, offering them $400 in sexual favors in return. However, her classmates eventually refused, causing her plan to fail. The situation changed dramatically when Amy started going to the gym and met the gym owner, Paul Meckley, a 30-year-old man. They began a romantic relationship. In addition, Amy regularly met 3 clients, providing them with intimate services. At this point, she decided to stop using the company's services and started seeing clients directly. She openly shared details of her life with Paul. Since he knew Joey well, Paul tried to convince Amy to end her relationship with Joey, who was married. When Joey finds out that Amy is dating someone else, he becomes anxious for fear of losing her. He tries to interfere with her new relationship. But all his efforts are unsuccessful. Meanwhile, Paul and Amy decide to get revenge on Joey. Their plan is to inform his wife, Mary, about Joey's affair. To carry out their plan, they hire a 21-year-old named Peter Gorgenti to drive Amy to Mary's house. They steal the license plate from a random car in town to use on Peter's car. On May 19, 1992, Amy went to school but did not intend to attend classes. Instead, she went straight to the nurse, saying she felt unwell, and was sent home. Peter was waiting for her in his car at the entrance. They switched the license plates and drove to the Mary family's house. At 11:30, Amy knocked on the door. At that moment, Mary was inside the house drawing by herself. When Mary opened the door, Amy asked her to step out onto the porch for an important conversation. Amy introduced herself using a fake name and told a story about Joey being in a relationship with her sister. However, Mary did not believe her. She thought her husband had stopped partying and had become a devoted family man. The Amy guest became very anxious. She felt frustrated by Mary's lack of trust. To prove her connection, she revealed a T-shirt with the logo of the auto repair shop where Joey worked. However, Mary still did not believe and rejected Amy's story. This led to a heated argument that lasted 15 minutes. The Amy tried every possible way to persuade the Mary that her husband was having an affair. Amy concealed important details such as her actual age, where she lived, and her relationship with the Joey, twisting the truth to fit her story. As a result, Amy's lies seemed even less credible. Eventually, the Mary turned away and headed for the door, asking the Amy to leave. It was clear that she viewed the girl's claims as fabrications and had no intention of listening further. In a fit of rage, Amy hit Mary in the head and accidentally shot her. The recoil of the gun knocked Amy to the ground, and Mary landed on top of Amy. She then pushed Mary away, quickly got up, and got into Peter's car. She later told Peter that the gun had gone off accidentally, claiming that she had only meant to scare Mary. After fleeing the scene, they dumped the gun and Mary's bloody clothes in a sewer near her house. She returned home and pretended that nothing had happened. A passerby heard a loud bang but did not see Amy. He found Mary lying unconscious in a pool of blood on the porch. He quickly ran to a neighbor's house for help and called an ambulance. Doctors arrived in time and discovered that the bullet had hit a vital artery and shattered her jaw. Mary had lost a significant amount of blood and was in critical condition. Thanks to the passerby's quick actions, she had a chance of survival. Doctors assessed her condition and thought she had a good chance of recovery and rushed her to the hospital. The bullet was lodged near her spine, making it impossible to remove. Mary was placed on life support overnight while undergoing surgery. Fortunately, she regained consciousness a few days later and was able to provide the police with a description of her attacker. Mary repeated Amy's story, but Amy had given a false address and name, rendering the information futile. However, there was one clue, a T-shirt with the logo of Joey's auto repair shop. The police approached Joey for information. He explained that he had distributed a large number of the T-shirts for promotional purposes. He also gave the police a photo of Amy, his mistress. Joey suspected her of being involved, which helped the police identify the attacker. On May 21st, Amy was arrested on the street near her home. She was then subjected to a 12-hour interrogation without her parents or an attorney present, a violation of the legal protections afforded to minors. Her parents had no idea what had happened. When they returned home that evening, they assumed Amy had simply run away again, so they were not concerned when she did not return home that night. The police did not inform them that their daughter had been arrested for attempted murder. When details of the case became public, journalists quickly became interested in Amy, a girl with a troubled life and crime. They reported that she had sold her body and had attacked a respectable married woman with a gun. This caused public outrage and reporters searched for any information they could find. A video emerged showing Amy with another client. Weeks after her arrest, Amy had not confessed to any of the crimes. She was held on $2 million bail. Her story attracted a lot of attention. Amy to post bail and spend time at home while awaiting trial. However, the media attention severely harmed her reputation. Amy claimed that the illegal activities she was involved in were a result of Joey's influence, as he pressured her into selling her body at a young age. This became the central argument that her lawyers used in their defense strategy. Joey denied having an affair with Amy, but evidence emerged in the form of 13 receipts from a motel where he met Amy, confirming their secret involvement. Several motel employees confirmed frequent visits. During the court proceedings, Amy spoke against him, providing evidence linking his handwriting to the relationship. However, Joey maintained that the accusations were fabricated. Even Mary sided with him, refuting Amy's. While waiting for her trial, Amy focused on preparing for it. She spent all her money on bail, leaving her unable to pay her lawyer, who agreed to defend her for free. There were rumors that she was having an affair with her lawyer, who seemed to have feelings for her and even sent her gifts. On the advice of her attorney, she accepted a plea deal with the prosecution. With the weapon and motive, it would be difficult to argue that the gun went off accidentally. On September 23, 1992, after turning 18, she confessed to the accidental killing. Amy stated that she was angry with Mary because she refused to listen. When Mary turned away, Amy hit her in the head twice with the gun. After the second strike, the gun accidentally went off, injuring Mary. Amy maintained that she did not intend to kill Mary. It was an accident that she deeply regretted. Journalists discovered that Amy was involved in a romantic relationship with the gym's owner, Paul. He sought to capitalize on the situation by attracting media attention. Paul even installed a hidden camera in his gym to secretly film a personal conversation with Amy. Paul admitted he enjoyed the media attention and was eager to appear in news stories, as they paid well. With the money from this exposure, Paul planned to buy a Ferrari. Once Amy realized that even Paul was exploiting her, she attempted to take her own life again. Subsequently, she was required to undergo treatment in a psychiatric clinic, where she stayed for several months. On December 2, Amy appeared in court. Mary felt the plea deal was unfair because it allowed Amy to be released after only 2 years and 9 months, a punishment that seemed inadequate given the severity of the crime. Mary, who survived the attack, suffered partial facial paralysis and hearing loss in her right ear due to the bullet lodged in her spine. The injury left her in constant pain and with vision problems. Doctors warned that if the bullet had moved, she could have been completely paralyzed or even killed. When Amy was given the opportunity to speak, she apologized and blamed Joey for everything. She claimed that he knew about her plan to shoot his wife from the beginning and even encouraged her. Although Amy wants to bring Joey to justice, there is no evidence linking him to the crime. Amy later admitted that she intended to kill Mary. Several witnesses confirmed that Amy had mentioned wanting to kill Mary. The investigation found that the gun was functioning properly and could not have been fired randomly, given the trajectory and force of the bullet. In addition, it was suspected that Amy and her accomplice Peter had taken steps to prepare for this trip, such as changing the license plate and purchasing weapons. This suggested that they were planning a targeted attack. During the trial, Amy's hopes of serving only 2 years and 9 months in prison were dashed. Instead, she pleaded guilty to first-degree assault with aggravated circumstances and received a 15-year sentence. Peter Guagenti, who drove her to Mary's house, was arrested and charged with being an accessory to the crime and was sentenced to 6 months in prison. Joey appeared on several television shows with his wife to prove his innocence. They even went on a small press tour and appeared on various channels across the country. During this time, the prosecutor's office began to receive many calls from people who believed that Joey should also face legal consequences because they thought he was indirectly involved in the incident. The police could no longer ignore the accusations against Joey. The following April, Joey Buttafogo was arrested and charged with sex with a minor. Joey reached a plea deal with the prosecutor and admitted his guilt. As a result, he served only 6 months in prison and paid a $5,000 fine. He claimed he had been wrongly convicted, portraying himself as the victim of a deceitful schoolgirl. After pleading guilty, He ended up serving only 4 months in prison before being released. In 1995, Joey was arrested again in Los Angeles for soliciting prostitution. He claimed he was innocent and that the incident was staged. As a result, he served the last 75 days of his sentence. During this time, Mary fell into a severe depression and took medication to cope with the pain. After the family moved to Los Angeles, she became an alcoholic but later went to rehab, which improved her life. Amy's time in prison was difficult. She complained that she was raped by prison guards multiple times. Amy wanted to be transferred to another facility, but the prison authorities refused. In 1999, after serving 7 years in prison, Amy was granted early parole. During a meeting with the parole board, she tearfully confessed that the attack on her lover's wife was entirely her idea. Realizing her wrongdoing led to her release. Meanwhile, Mary discovered that her husband had been cheating on her multiple times. Unable to bear her husband's constant infidelity, she filed for divorce in 2003 after 26 years of marriage. At the same time, Joey was arrested for attempted insurance fraud involving his car. He never learned from his mistakes. He remarried and continued to live an eccentric lifestyle. After the divorce, Mary had facial surgery that allowed her to smile normally and partially regain her hearing. During this time, her children were very supportive. In 2009, she published a book about her life story. For years, she harbored resentment toward Amy for shooting her. However, during her rehabilitation, Mary realized that it was time to let go of the past and stop punishing herself. This realization led her to forgive Amy. In 2010, Mary remarried and moved to California, where she became a grandmother and enjoyed a peaceful life. After her release from prison, Amy moved to Florida and wrote 2 books about her life. She sought fame and money, even creating a false identity. Amy began working as a webcam model and adult film actress, frequently appearing on talk shows to share her experiences. After marrying a former New York police officer and having 3 children, her marriage ended in divorce in 2015. Their eldest son stayed with his father, while Amy returned to Long Island with her 2 younger children and lived with her mother for a time. During this time, she worked as a stripper in a strip club but eventually quit. She continued to work as a webcam model. Her ex-husband did not support this lifestyle. He suggested that Amy buy a smaller house, preferably in a remote area where she could remain anonymous and find a regular job and live more modestly. However, she refused his offer. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jesse McFadden. At that time, Holly was 35 years old. She had 3 children from a previous relationship, 13 years old Tiffany, 17 years old Riley Allen, and 15 years old Michael Mayo. Each child had a different father. Holly was married to Joe, a prominent man, for 13 years. He was a wonderful father and stepfather to all the children. Even after their divorce, Joe continued to care for the children as if they were his own. He also wanted to adopt Riley and Michael, but he was never able to do so. Holly's new husband, Jesse McFadden, was not as good a father as Joe. At 39 years old, Jesse had a troubling past, including a criminal record. In 2003, he was charged with assaulting and raping a 15-year-old girl at knife point. He received a 20-year prison sentence, but got out 3 years early, in October 2020, after serving 17 years. Despite his history, Jesse was not placed on the sex offender list or the list of potentially dangerous criminals, which the authorities should have done. As a result, he kept his past from Holly and portrayed himself as a model stepfather. He attended her children's sports games and engaging with the family. His past remained hidden, and he was seen as a good person. He gives the impression of being a kind man and regularly attended the local church. Holly had no idea that she was getting involved with a very dangerous man. Jesse was about to go crazy and commit a heinous crime. In 1916, while serving time in prison, he had his mobile phone confiscated. On the phone, authorities found photos, videos, and text messages involving a 16-year-old girl named Caitlin. Her grandfather accidentally discovered this sensitive content and reported it to the police, thereby leading to an investigation in the prison. At that time, Jesse was considered a model prisoner, participating in almost all activities, which under state law, made him eligible for parole after serving 85% of his sentence. Despite meeting all the conditions for parole, Jesse lost this privilege due to the incident involving Caitlin. However, he eventually managed to resolve the situation and secure his parole. After being released from prison, Jesse followed the rule of reporting to the sheriff's office every 90 days. He did this so discreetly that Holly, the children, and neighbors were unaware of his situation. Holly, his wife, was unaware that he was forbidden from being in places with children, such as schools and sports matches. Meanwhile, Jesse was still under investigation and awaiting trial for explicit photos of Caitlin he had corresponded with while in prison. The trial was delayed until 2023 due to a series of unfortunate incidents. The prosecutor handling the case was suspended, and Jesse's lawyer passed away. On May 1, 2023, as the trial is about to begin, a terrible tragedy occurred the day before. On the morning of May 1, 2023, the parents of Ivy and Brittany became worried. Ivy and Brittany are Tiffany's friends. They were best friends and often spent time together, including sleeping together overnight. Everyone expected Ivy and Brittany to return home after a sleepover on April 29, but both did not return. Initially, their parents weren't concerned, as the girls frequently stayed overnight at each other's houses, and they assumed their daughters were spending another night with Tiffany. However, by the morning of May 1, they still cannot contact their children. Ivy and Brittany did not respond to their parents' calls or text messages and could not be located using the Life 360 app. Ivy and Brittany's parents also couldn't contact Tiffany and her family to confirm if their daughters were there. Because they were increasingly worried, they reported Ivy and Brittany missing to the police that same day. The police issued a missing persons alert for Ivy and Brittany and immediately began an investigation. Based on information from the girls' parents, they decided to check Jesse's house, where Ivy and Brittany were before they went missing. Upon arrival, the police officers knocked on the door but received no response. Looking through the windows, they saw something unusual inside, so they decided to enter the house. The scene inside the house horrified all the police. Inside, they found 7 mutilated bodies. Some people can only be identified through forensic examination. Among them was Jesse himself, his wife Holly, Riley, Michael, Tiffany, Brittany, and Ivy. All the victims were shot in the head with a 9mm pistol. Bodies were scattered throughout the house. The detectives determined that the murderer was a former criminal named Jesse McFadden. He attacked all the victims and then ended his life. The probable reason was that on May 1st, he was supposed to start a trial that had been postponed for a long time. It is presumed that he did it because he could no longer hide his dark criminal past. Perhaps his wife, Holly, discovered it, or he was worried that she would soon find out, so he killed his entire family to take his secret to the grave. After the officers reviewed Jesse's cell phone, they were able to clarify the motive. On April 30th, he contacted Caitlin, a girl he had been messaging from prison, using a fake account under the name Holly. He accused her of not withdrawing the charges against him, which he claimed was destroying his well-established life. He explained that after being released 2 years ago, he had rebuilt his life. He found a high-paying marketing job, started a family. He tried to convince Caitlin to recant her testimony to stop the trial. He argued that he had a good family and promising future. He sent several angry messages, asserting that he would never return to prison, regardless of the cost. The police concluded that he was enraged because he couldn't control his accuser, Caitlin. Detectives contacted Crystal Strong, a 36-year-old woman who was Jesse's first victim. In 2002, when she was only 15, Jesse attacked her with a knife. She was shocked to hear that he might be released from prison, believing he should remain behind bars forever. Crystal learns that the man who brutally sexually assaulted her has been pardoned. Despite the decision being made, but she still asked Oklahoma authorities to prevent his release because she believed he was dangerous in nature. At that time, she feared for her safety. After the attack, she detailed her ordeal to the police. Jesse, then 19 and dating her friend, kidnapped her from her home while she was alone. He took her to a secluded house in his pickup truck, where he chained her to a bed and brutally raped her. Despite her pleas for him to stop and release her, but he threatened her with a knife and continued his assault. Fortunately, he didn't kill her. Jesse instructed Crystal to wash off the evidence and clean her clothes. She agreed but instead used the opportunity to escape through the back door. She was crying and ran about half a kilometer to a neighbor's house to call the police. Following this, she underwent an extensive rehabilitation process, which helped her return to a normal life. She relocated to Kansas, where she hid for years due to the trauma of the brutal attack. Although doctors initially believed she couldn't have children, thankfully, their predictions were wrong. Crystal now has 4 children, which she views as a miracle. Crystal is confused that the police released Jesse, a dangerous criminal, too soon, even though she warned that he could not be reformed. It is also confusing why he was freed early despite being intoxicated. She believes the legal system has failed them, especially when he murdered 6 people in a brutal and painful manner. The victims' families also expressed their anger over Jesse's early release. It's hard to imagine how this cruel person managed to pretend to be a loving husband, a respectable neighbor, and a caring stepfather. None of his close friends suspect his horrific past. Although he regularly interacted with various people since December 2020, they were all shocked when the truth emerged. Ivy and Brittany's parents remember that their daughter and Tiffany were very close and often visited each other's homes. Ivy and Brittany's parents were familiar with Jesse and Holly and communicated with them regularly. They did not suspect Jesse, although he occasionally appeared strange and withdrawn. He had the odd habit of controlling Holly's and the children's movements, but they did not think much of it. Ivy and Brittany, who frequently stayed overnight at their homes, never mentioned anything negative about Jesse or his behavior. Ivy and Brittany never showed signs of bruises or injuries that would suggest abuse. During the investigation, it was discovered that Holly learned about Jesse's criminal past shortly before the tragedy. Holly's ex-husband found out about Jesse's criminal record by checking the database. He informed Holly, but Jesse acted quickly to cover up his past. Jesse hired an actress to convince Holly that the sexual assault allegations against him were a misunderstanding. The actress admitted that after the breakup, she accused Jesse of violence out of anger. However, she retracted the accusation after realizing she was wrong. Holly, unfortunately, believed this lie. Inside the house, police discovered even more terrifying clues. They found that all of Jesse's victims had been subjected to severe torture. The house resembled a torture chamber, with several beds equipped with chains and locks to restrain people. In the kitchen, police found a chain with a lock and different torture devices. The shocking clues are not just that. Bottles of lubricant and other sexual items were strewn around the house. Illegal substances and their paraphernalia were found across all rooms, including candies laced with similar content. Police also discovered other strange-looking objects and various blood-stained items, such as clothes, rags, and bed linen. Altogether, these clues indicate that the crime was horrific, revealing that Jesse's victims endured brutal torture before being killed. Holly and her children were likely tortured for several days. On April 29th, when Ivy and Brittany did visit Tiffany, they fell into a trap. They were tortured. Then, as they struggled to escape, but Jesse captured and killed them. During a house search, several laptops and mobile phones belonging to Jesse were discovered. These devices contained photos and videos documenting his torture activities. There was so much shocking evidence that the police couldn't collect everything in one day. Additional evidence of the brutal torture was gathered a few days later. A second search was conducted, uncovering more hidden evidence in the house and revealing new details. Receipts were found for purchases of locks, chains, and other items, shows that Jesse had a plan to control the victims. In addition, 5 other cell phones were found, along with Jesse's notebook, which contained the names of his recent victims. Jesse noted that he wanted to start a new life and become a better person, but no matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't change the past. He also did not hesitate to impersonate Ivy. For example, Ivy's mother said the last message she received from her daughter was on Saturday, April 29th. They agreed that Ivy would come home on Sunday, April 30th. However, on the morning of April 30th, she received a text saying Ivy and her friends were going to another city and couldn't return that evening. Therefore, she didn't worry until the morning of May 1st. Although there were reasons for concern, she didn't notice them right away. The communication style of the message was unlike her daughter's. She thought it was because Ivy was in a hurry to get ready for the trip. Only now does she realize that her daughter was probably no longer alive at that point, and it was Jesse who was messaging her. The hardest thing for Holly's ex-husband, who is also the father of Riley, Michael, and Tiffany, is that he has been unable to provide any information to the police. Holly's ex-husband accused Jesse not only of the crimes he committed but also of his lies. He criminal tricked Holly by hiring an actress and hid his violent nature from friends, neighbors, and his new family for 2 years. The parents of Ivy and Brittany frequently visited their home, but no one suspected Jesse could be dangerous or doubted his identity. Detectives spoke with Jesse's former cellmate and were even more amazed at his deceptive skills. The cellmate, who spent almost every hour of the day with Jesse, only realized something was off after 6 months. Initially, Jesse seemed just like an eccentric and awkward individual. Nearly every conversation with him led to the topic of sex, revealing his obsession with it. At a medical facility, the cellmate saw Jesse stalking nurses. When he asked Jesse about his conviction, he got a vague response. Jesse mentioned a much lesser charge than what he had committed. The truth came out during an incident involving a contraband phone, which worsened the atmosphere in the cell. From then on, the cellmate was constantly tense, unable to sleep peacefully whenever Jesse was around. The tragic death of 6 people has caused strong public outrage. People were shocked by the incident. 6 innocent individuals were killed: Holly, her 3 children, and 2 teenage friends, Ivy and Brittany. The public accused state police of negligence, ignoring evidence, and failing to monitor dangerous criminals and manage parole for Jesse. Everyone was outraged, questioning why no one recognized how dangerous Jesse was. They believed that if his danger had been known, people would have avoided interacting with him, potentially preventing this tragedy. Even now, this case leaves more questions than answers. Holly's behavior is also unclear. The police are exploring all possibilities, including the idea that she not only knew about Jesse's past but also became an accomplice. Holly's mother firmly denies this theory, insisting that she was a loving, caring mother who could never harm her children. The police are still considering the possibility that Holly was an accomplice, but things spiraled out of control, leading Jesse to kill her and then end his life. However, these claims have yet to be confirmed or refuted. The investigation is ongoing. Jesse McFadden's family has been plagued by legal issues. His younger brother, Cody, has been involved in legal trouble since 2010. Cody was arrested for kidnapping a woman, locking her in a dog cage, assaulting her, and torturing her. Cody's case is still pending in court. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Gladys Ricart. In 1979, in Tamboril, Dominican Republic, 20 years old, Gladys Ricart was raising her young son alone after her high school relationship failed. Her sister Norma lived in the United States, and she dreamed of joining her. Determined to make her dream come true, she worked tirelessly, saved every penny, and made many sacrifices. Eventually, her hard work paid off, and she was able to move to the U.S., settling with her sister's family in Manhattan, New York. However, she could not afford to bring her son Davis with her initially, so he stayed with family back in the Dominican Republic. After arriving in the U.S., Gladys focused on learning English and found a job. She worked diligently to save enough money to reunite with her son. By 1983, she succeeded in bringing 4-year-old Davis to the U.S. Determined to build a brighter future, she enrolled in college. Believed that education is the key to opening up better opportunities for yourself. She graduated with a degree in economics and used her knowledge to pursue a career in accounting. Due to her hard work, she quickly became a top expert and one of the most important employees of the company. Gladys started from the very bottom and worked her way up to become the chief accountant at a large travel agency in the heart of Manhattan. Over time, she improved her English, pursued an education, built a successful career, and saved enough money to buy an apartment. In many ways, she had achieved the American dream. The only thing missing was a family and true love. Despite this, she was cautious when it came to relationships. While it seemed that she prioritized her career over marriage, this was deep down. She longed to meet her soulmate. By 1992, after living in the United States for 10 years, Gladys had a daily routine. She took the subway to work in the morning and returned in the evening to her sister's house. One day on the subway, she met Agustin Garcia. He is a well-known leader in Dominica and also a successful professional. At 40, he has built a successful career after immigrating from the Dominican Republic to the United States as a child. Like Gladys, he had risen from poverty to success. By the time they met, he owned several small businesses and lived in a large house with his 2 children from a previous marriage. Agustin was highly respected within the Dominican community and was known as a dependable and helpful individual. Having experienced the hardships of migration and immigration himself, he is passionate about helping anyone who wishes to pursue this challenging path. He eventually became the director of the Dominican Chamber of Commerce in New York, along with several other organizations connected to his homeland. Beyond his roles in these organizations, he was deeply involved in social initiatives. Through his efforts, several kindergartens and schools were established, establishing him as a respected and influential person in the community. Agustin seems to be the ideal mate for Gladys, a determined and compassionate young woman. What she found most appealing about him was his kind and gentle nature. He was polite, sociable, and carried himself like a true gentleman, which immediately caught her attention. Their meeting was purely coincidental, as Agustin rarely used the subway. However, on this particular day, his car broke down, and he ended up taking the train. He was instantly captivated by Gladys's beauty and decided to strike up a conversation. They spent the rest of the ride talking, exchanged phone numbers, and quickly arranged to meet again. From that moment, their romance began. Agustin frequently took Gladys to restaurants, treated her to exquisite meals, and showered her with expensive gifts. When her family learned about her new boyfriend, Agustin, they were happy for her. He seemed like an ideal partner and a good father to her son. After some time together, Agustin invited Gladys to move in with him, and she eagerly accepted this long-awaited proposal. According to what she shared with her family and friends, her greatest dream at the time was for Augustine to propose marriage so they could build a family together. She envisioned raising 3 children with him, and even hoped to have more children of their own. At that point, she was not yet 33 years old. Once Gladys moved in with Augustine, things quickly began to deteriorate. Her son, Davis, had great difficulty getting along with Augustine's children. The boy tried his best, especially because of the sincere advice of his mother, who always wanted him to learn how to build good relationships with people. However, Augustine's children treated Davis with arrogance, and the situation never improved. The situation is getting more complicated. Augustine consistently sided with his children, even when they were clearly in the wrong, which created strain in his relationship with Gladys. After 2 years of enduring such a life and constant arguments, she decided she didn't want to cause her son any more pain. She told Augustine that they should stop living together. Augustine agreed, but did not end their relationship. He helped her find a new house, just a few minutes' drive from his own. It was a spacious 2-story house, and he didn't hesitate to spend money on her, perhaps as a way to ease the tension between them. They continued to see each other when he visited she. By this time, her family and friends had grown so accustomed to he that they considered him practically part of the family. He introduced Gladys as his wife wherever they went. Although they were not legally married, but Gladys kept trying to convince Augustine to have a wedding. However, he firmly refused because of the negative experience in his previous marriage. He insisted he didn't want to marry or have children again. According to Gladys's relatives, over time, this situation took a toll on her. The happiness in her relationship gradually fades, and Augustine's unpleasant personality becomes more and more apparent. He frequently had affairs and increasingly exhibit over-controlling behavior. The situation becomes even more complicated for Gladys, as she has known about his actions, but kept silent for a long time to avoid causing conflict. Unfortunately, her silence only made things worse. During one argument, he chased she and attacked her. She managed to hide and lock herself in a room, but from that moment, she realized it was time to end the relationship. However, she remained fearful of his manipulation for a while. Gladys wanted a solid reason to break up, one that would leave Augustine with no way to argue. The simplest way was to catch him in one of his affairs. By the fall of 1998, the situation became more tense when she went to Augustine's office and caught him with another woman. This gave her the perfect opportunity to end things. She immediately told him that things were over between them, left his house, and informed all his acquaintances that he was no longer a part of her life. Even though they had broken up, Augustine was not ready to accept such changes. He considered Gladys as his property after 7 years together. Following their argument, he repeatedly called her, left gifts on her doorstep, including bouquets of flowers and even a Bible. Gladys thinks these gestures are just meant to make her come back, but her family believed they held deeper symbolic meaning. Regardless, she was determined not to rekindle their relationship under any circumstances. Several months later, Gladys met a man named James Preston Jr. at a restaurant during her lunch break. James, who also worked in accounting and moonlighted as a musician, immediately clicked with she. They quickly fell in love, and after a few meetings, they decided to make their relationship public. Over the next 2 months, they spent all their free time together, and eventually, they set a wedding date for September 26, 1999. Gladys and her family were overjoyed as her lifelong dream of a wedding and wearing a wedding dress finally came true. She immersed herself completely in planning the wedding, focusing on every step of the preparation with complete joy. She was so preoccupied that she didn't realize Augustine had been coming to her house nearly every night, watching her for hours. His obsessive behavior made it clear he couldn't let go of his possessiveness. On August 12, about 6 weeks before the wedding, Gladys and her fiancé, James, were enjoying a quiet evening together when Augustine suddenly showed up at the door. Initially, he calmly asked to speak with her, but she refused. His demeanor quickly changed. He began yelling and throwing stones at the windows. Worried he might get more aggressive, she called the police. Augustine was taken into custody, but she chose not to press charges, wanting to avoid causing him trouble and to stay focused on her wedding preparations. This decision turned out to be a significant mistake. In September, just 2 days before the wedding, Gladys went to a store to purchase some items needed for the bridesmaids. Unbeknownst to her, Augustine had been following her. He approached her, hugged her as if they were still in a relationship, and behaved as though everything was fine between them. Gladys didn't resist, fearing that rejecting him might provoke his anger. They exchanged a few words before saying goodbye. That evening, she confided in James and family, sharing her discomfort and concerns about Augustine's intrusive behavior. However, she had no idea just how dangerous he truly was. On September 26, 1999, the day she had long awaited, her wedding day, finally arrived. She was at home surrounded by her family and friends, preparing for her wedding ceremony. She wore a wedding dress, had her hair, makeup done, radiant and happy to be a bride. Photos and videos captured these joyful moments, which tragically turned out to be the final ones of her life. Meanwhile, the groom, James, was already waiting for her at the church. However, the joy of the wedding was spoiled when Augustine, who was watching her, suddenly appeared. He used violence to murder her, causing her instant death. When paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do to save her. Her dream of a wedding was painfully unfinished. Augustine was immediately arrested and taken into custody without attempting to flee or resist. During his interrogation, he admitted to frequently driving past Gladys's house, claiming it was due to his sentimentality. On the morning of September 26, he was surprised to see a crowd of people dressed formally, along with several limousines parked outside her home. He claimed he had no idea she was getting married that day. After driving past the house multiple times, he eventually stopped in front of it. Still unsure whose wedding it was, he decided to go inside to find out. As Augustine got out of his car across the street, Gladys's brother, Juan, approached him cautiously, aware of his bad temper. Juan tried to convince him to leave to avoid disrupting the wedding. It was then that he realized she was marrying someone else, but he didn't show any reaction. Augustine claimed he had been invited to the wedding, so Juan did not stop him, and he calmly entered the house. No one objected to his presence. Initially, when questioned about the attack on Gladys, Augustine claimed that he had no memory of it. However, after a while, he confessed to the detectives. The next day, he was brought to court for a preliminary hearing where he faced the charges against him. During this hearing, he had the opportunity to plead guilty and avoid a lengthy trial. The bail was set at $5 million, showing that he is a major threat to the community. The attack quickly became a major focus of attention because of the extensive media coverage. Journalists raced to create sensational headlines, spread rumors, and even offer unsubstantiated theories. Images of the killer, Augustine, began to appear regularly on national news. The case's prominence attracted numerous lawyers, especially top lawyers, who want to use the trial to enhance their reputation and advance their careers. Augustine's trial was scheduled for October 2, 2001, allowing the defense nearly 2 years to prepare and build a more positive image for the defendant. The hired lawyers quickly engaged with the media, organizing press conferences and making public statements. Their objective was to influence public opinion about the crime by portraying Augustine as a victim. Their first move was to accuse Gladys's brother, Juan, and her son Davis of assaulting Augustine. They argued that there was no intention to kill Gladys, and her death happened accidentally when he defended himself from an attack by Juan and Davis. At the same time, the defense sought to discredit Gladys by accusing her of multiple betrayals. They claimed she had been planning to reconcile with Agustin, but was secretly preparing to marry James. According to the defense, this betrayal pushed Agustin into a mental breakdown, leading him to attack her. They stated that he had been devastated to discover that Gladys, who had been holding hands with him at the supermarket just the day before, was preparing to marry James. They believe this is a crime due to emotional outbursts, which qualifies as manslaughter under state law. If accepted, this argument would significantly reduce Agustin's punishment to a sentence of 5 to 10 years in prison instead of life imprisonment. The defense emphasized that Agustin was a compassionate person who cared about the Latino community in New York. This has had a strong impact on public opinion. When false rumors began circulating that Gladys had been unfaithful to Agustin, her image in the public eye became negative. Some even believed that she deserved her fate. This was a devastating blow to her family. Realizing the immense damage caused by Agustin's legal team, her relatives started attending every press conference to protect her reputation. Gladys's family, siblings, and extended relatives denied the infidelity rumors, calling them malicious lies. They emphasized that the relationship between she and Agustin had ended long ago and could not be rekindled. It was Agustin who was always following her and acted inappropriately. They emphasized that out of compassion, Gladys did not file a lawsuit against him before the murder. The judge was informed about the murder. Press conferences and interviews with journalists were officially prohibited, but they had already caused harm to Gladys's reputation, create difficulties for the prosecution. During the trial, the defense team continued to depict Agustin as a victim, while tarnishing Gladys's image. However, the prosecution has one big advantage: the attack and Gladys's death had been caught on camera. The opening part of the wedding ceremony and preparations were recorded, but Agustin hadn't noticed it. Before the trial began, only the judge was allowed to view the footage. The defense argued that showing the video to the jury was unfair and worked hard to block its usage as evidence. After lengthy deliberations, the court ruled that the video could be used, but only the part where Gladys was attacked. This was a 15-second clip, and the prosecution worried it wouldn't be enough to persuade the jury, particularly since the defense could argue the clip was taken out of context. This limitation gave the defense some opportunity to build their case. The defense argued that Agustin was forced to take up arms after being attacked by Gladys' brother and son, and claimed that Agustin's attack on Gladys was unintentional. Despite the objections of Gladys's family, the defense insisted that everything stemmed from her dissolute behavior. They presented several witnesses, including a neighboring family. The father and daughter testified that they had recently seen Gladys at Agustin's house and believed the two were still living together as a couple. In reality, Gladys had visited only to collect her remaining belongings. Through such testimony, the defense succeeded in making the jury sympathize with Agustin. However, the prosecution was prepared to counter these claims. The prosecution relied heavily on video evidence showing the crime. The video captured Agustin murdering Gladys in front of her family, including her son, shows that he did not act in self-defense. The footage shows that after he entered her home, no one attacked or threatened him, contrary to his testimony. However, he still attacked Gladys as soon as he entered. The prosecution argued this was a premeditated act born out of jealousy. The prosecutor's office attempted to counter misleading statements from defense attorneys who sought to portray Gladys as an immoral person. There was evidence proving that after the breakup, Agustin had stalked she for an extended period. All of her relatives confirmed this. Even her son was afraid of he, knowing how cruel he truly was. Agustin's kindness and selflessness were merely a facade, hiding his true sinister nature. For at least several months, he had been surveilling her and making unannounced visits. In his car, authorities discovered a list of license plate numbers belonging to cars parked near her house. He wasn't just spying on her, he was meticulously tracking everyone in her vicinity. likely to distinguish the neighbor's vehicles from the car of her future husband, James. During the trial, Augustine made an unexpected and controversial decision. He chose to testify on his own behalf before the jury. This decision significantly influenced the outcome of the case. In legal practice, such a move can either be a strategic advantage or a disastrous mistake for the accused. The prosecution asked him to recount the incident that took place in the house. One would think he would tailor his testimony to fit the defense's arguments, that he acted in a state of temporary insanity and was not in control of himself. He alleged that Juan and Davis attacked him, but this claim had already been disproven by video evidence. He also said that at that time, he lost of awareness and could not remember how he attacked her. However, he did not provide any evidence to support his claim of temporary amnesia. Although Augustine tried to show remorse and even shed tears, his actions were not convincing enough. For the prosecution, his testimony only strengthened their case, as it contradicted the defense's argument and offered no plausible reason for his actions. On February 1, 2002, Gladys's family awaited the final verdict. After a lengthy hearing, the jury deliberated and found Augustine guilty of premeditated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 30 years. Gladys was buried in her hometown of Tamboril in the Dominican Republic. Her body was brought home a week after her death and she was buried in her wedding dress. After his conviction, Augustine refused to speak publicly or give any opinion. A reporter later discovered that he turned to religion early in his imprisonment and began preaching to other inmates. Meanwhile, his lawyers fought for a reduced sentence, but several appeals were denied. Augustine remains in prison and will be eligible for parole in 2029. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Roni Reuter. On the morning of Thursday, October 4, 2007, neighbors of Roni heard heart-wrenching screams and loud bangs coming from her apartment. Alarmed, they called 911 and requested authorities to investigate. The police arrived immediately, and when no one came to open the door, they forced their way inside. In the kitchen, they found a woman lying face down, wearing body armor, with wounds to her head, arms, and pregnant belly. It appeared she had tried to shield her unborn child by covering her stomach with her hands, causing both her hands and stomach to be injured. There were 2 wounds to her abdomen, indicating that the baby was the main target of the attack. The attacker then inflicted injuries to the back of her head. Tragically, both she and her unborn child were dead. The brutality of the crime left the police deeply shaken, questioning who could commit such a horrific act against a pregnant woman. A forensic investigation uncovered a spent 9mm cartridge case and 5 unused cartridges near the body. There were no signs of forced entry, robbery, or sexual assault, ruling out a random attack or burglary. This led investigators to believe the murder was personal and premeditated. It seems that Roni has a dangerous enemy who has harmed her. Police theorize that the attacker attacked Roni as she was preparing to leave the apartment to go to work, ambushing her when she opened the door. Detectives interviewed her neighbors, hoping to find witnesses or valuable leads. The neighbors reported hearing sounds resembling gunshots, leading authorities to suspect the killer used a silenced weapon. A neighbor reported seeing a skinny African-American teenager wearing a hooded sweatshirt, walking up the stairs to Roni's door at around 7:00 a.m., shortly before the incident. Later, another neighbor saw this person running out of the house, get into a small black car, and drive away from the parking lot. Police reviewed surveillance footage from cameras near the house. The footage captured a black car, likely a Volkswagen, arriving at 7:04 a.m. and leaving at 7:55 a.m., aligning with the time frame of the murder. However, the driver of the car has not yet been identified. Inside Roni's purse, investigators discovered a mysterious letter. The letter referenced Sean, the father of her unborn child, and claimed to have uncovered details about him. It alleged that Sean had romantic relationships with women from various countries, listing the names and phone numbers of 16 women he had affairs with. The letter also mentioned Ronnie's pregnancy, stating that Sean did not want the baby. Detectives suspected the murder was linked to Ronnie's pregnancy and believed Sean might have crucial information. The teenager seen near the house became the primary suspect, and both he and the black car were placed on a wanted list. Meanwhile, investigators began looking into Ronnie's social relationship to determine if she had any enemies. She was born in the small town of Potosi, Wisconsin. She met Sean at a charity event in Wisconsin, and the two quickly fell in love. After completing college, she moved to Deerfield, Illinois, a wealthy Chicago suburb with a population of 20,000. At the time of the murder, Ronnie was 42 years old, lived alone in her condominium. She was 7 months pregnant, eagerly preparing for the arrival of her first child, a baby girl she planned to name Skylar. The father of her child was Sean, 45, her partner of 17 years. Despite dating for many years, they did not marry or live together. Sean, a former Chicago Bears football player, was questioned by detectives for 10 hours. He shared how much he loved Ronnie and was looking forward to their child's birth. Ronnie deeply loved he, but Sean's feelings were more complex. He admitted to detectives that he had multiple affairs, which strained their relationship. He said that Ronnie knew about his infidelity, and it had caused her to grow distant from him. Despite this, he insisted he was excited to become a father. He appeared heartbroken over the tragic deaths of Ronnie and their unborn baby, and his emotions seemed genuine. Additionally, his strong, athletic build did not match the description of the thin teenager a neighbor claimed to have seen. Sean told the police that he had overslept that morning, he waking up at 9:15 a.m. and then went to a barbershop for a haircut. This alibi was confirmed by the barbershop administrator. However, the barbershop was close to Ronnie's house, just a 10-minute walk from her home, which made the detectives suspicious. They considered the possibility that Sean might have killed Ronnie or orchestrated the crime by hiring someone else. Despite his alibi, investigators did not eliminate him as a suspect and continued looking into his potential involvement. They questioned Sean's friends to evaluate whether he was capable of murder, his relationship with Ronnie, and whether he truly wanted the child. Sean's close friends have strenuously denied that he committed the crime, insisting that he was delighted to be a father, despite his relationships with other women. When detectives visited Sean's home for a follow-up interview, they discovered parenting books and baby items, indicating that he was preparing for fatherhood. During the interview, police asked who he thought might be responsible for the crime. He listed 16 women he had recently been involved with, and emphasized one name in particular, Monika Kurowska. Sean said that Monika, a fitness model from Poland, was someone he had dated while living in Europe. Their relationship ended a year ago, but Monika couldn't accept the breakup and began stalking him. She traveled to the United States and started following him. One night, she came to his apartment complex, ringing all the doors, including those of his neighbors and his own. When he stepped outside, he discovered a broken window and noticed Monika had blood on her hand. He found her behavior very worrying and dangerous, so he took out a restraining order against her. Sean suspects that Monika is the one who sent letters to Ronnie and his other lovers. These letters caused conflict between him and Ronnie. He suspects Monika because she follows him and knows all his secrets. In addition, the letters contain common errors in people who are just learning to speak English, like Monika. Even his mother received such a letter. Detectives became interested in Monika and eventually located her. During questioning, Monika denied any involvement in Ronnie's death, claiming she had an alibi. She was at work on the morning of the murder. The police confirmed her alibi. Monika shared a slightly different account of events. She admitted traveling to the USA to see Sean, hoping to win him back. Upon arriving at his home, she discovered him with another woman. In a fit of anger, she knocked hard on the window and accidentally broke it. Following this incident, she ended her relationship with Sean and claimed it was the last time she saw him. She also denied sending letters to Ronnie or Sean's mother, but the police remained skeptical of her story and continued to view her as a suspect. Despite their efforts, the investigation stalled. They suspect both Sean and Monica, as each had a motive to harm Ronnie, but both had alibis. No other suspects emerged. Then, the case took an unexpected turn. Police continued to question all of Ronnie and Sean's relatives. During the investigation, an acquaintance of theirs expressed suspicions about Marnie Yang, who was said to be obsessed with Sean. Investigators learned that Marnie had been in a relationship with Sean. The two had met 6 years earlier at a Chicago Bears convention, and Sean later reached out to her for help with real estate. Marnie, a realtor, had facilitated several real estate transactions for him. Marnie, single mother of 3 children, worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, including as a realtor, a waitress, and even photographer. Over time, she grew close to Sean, and their relationship continued up until Ronnie's murder. It was later revealed that they had slept together the day before the crime. This led investigators to scrutinize Marnie more closely. After speaking with her family and friends, they concluded that Marnie was obsessed with Sean. She viewed him as her possession and wouldn't leave him alone. When she discovered he had other relationships, she became furious. Her jealousy drove her to want he all to herself, believing he should belong only to her. She calls him her boyfriend, despite the fact that their relationship was short and fleeting. Detectives questioned Marnie, but she firmly denied any involvement in the crime. Despite this, she was unable to provide an alibi for the time of the murder. She claimed she was at home with her children, but the lack of evidence to support this made her the primary suspect. Detectives believe Marnie fits the description of the person they are looking for. With her petite build, she could easily be mistaken for a teenager if she was wearing a sweatshirt and hood. After obtaining a search warrant for the home, police discovered several important clues. Upon examining Marnie's computer, they discovered she had access to Sean's email and had been secretly monitoring his messages. Among the emails, they found letters from Monica to Sean written in broken English. Marnie had mimicked Monica's writing style, including the grammatical errors. She sent anonymous letters to several women involved in Sean's life, such as Ronnie and his mother. These letters contained accusations about Sean's relationships, and investigators concluded that her intention was to frame Monica as the main suspect. However, her plan ultimately failed. The police discovered a broken computer hard drive and several bank statements in Marnie's trash. The bank statements showed that she had hired a private investigator to collect detailed information about all the women in Sean's life, including their full names and addresses. Inside Marnie's apartment, investigators found postal receipts with the addresses of Ronnie and several other women who had received anonymous letters. It also came to light that Marnie owned a gun. In September 2005, she was stopped at the airport for purchasing and transporting 2 pistols and 200 rounds of ammunition. Although she provided the required paperwork, the weapons were declared and shipped to Chicago. Marnie's former lover, who was a deputy sheriff, confirmed that she owned multiple pistols and was highly skilled at shooting. One of her guns was a 9mm pistol, the same type used to kill Ronnie, though this particular weapon was never located. Investigators also learned that Marnie had attempted to construct her own silencer. Her bank statements revealed she had purchased a book titled How to Make a Disposable Silencer, along with a hacksaw and other materials from Home Depot. It can be used to make a disposable muffler. Detectives questioned Marnie about the evidence they had gathered. She said she bought the book as a joke gift for a friend and insisted she did not own a 9mm pistol or have any involvement in the crime. Despite her denials, 40-year-old Marnie was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Ronnie and her unborn child, based on the circumstantial evidence. The prosecution argued that Marnie's actions were driven by jealousy. She was infatuated with Sean and obsessed with keeping him to herself. To eliminate her rival, she sent anonymous letters to other women in Sean's life, causing many of them to leave him. However, Roni stayed. Although upset with Sean, Roni maintained their relationship, especially since she was carrying his child, a child he deeply wanted. Marnie doesn't want this child to be born because she knows that it might cause Sean and Roni to become more attached. Marnie's primary objective was to kill both the child and Roni. During the trial, witnesses familiar with Marnie testified about her extreme obsession with Sean and the drastic actions she took for his attention. They revealed that she had hacked into Sean's email account, read his correspondence with other women, and angrily deleted messages before he could see them. When she discovered emails from a woman named Monica, she devised a plan. Marnie, in Monica's writing style, sent an article exposing Sean from an anonymous email account with many errors. She spent the entire day talking about Sean, causing her colleagues to become concerned about her behavior. At the trial, even Marnie's daughter, Emilian, testified against her mother. Emilian, 20, expressed concern about Marnie's erratic behavior and obsession with Sean, which seemed to have driven her out of control. Sean also took the stand, detailing his tumultuous relationship with Marnie. He described their relationship as intense, but revealed that Marnie became deeply upset when she found out about other women in his life. She tried every way to keep him, but the obsession in her actions eventually drove him away. Sean said he had been planning to break up with her. When asked whether he believed Marnie could have murdered Roni, who was pregnant, he hesitated and expressed doubt. The prosecution's key witness was Christy Passion, a friend of Marnie's. Christy testified that Marnie had been reading Sean's emails and frequently expressed dissatisfaction with his relationships with other women. In the summer of 2007, Marnie confided in Christy about her frustration over Sean dating other women and even mentioned plans to kill him. At the time, Christy took it as a joke and assumed she was simply venting. However, when Marnie discovered that Roni was pregnant, her focus shifted. She saw Roni as her main rival and became determined to eliminate Roni's at any cost. She told Christy about her plans to kill Roni instead of Sean, believing this would allow her and Sean to be happy together. Christy once again paid no attention to this, thinking it was just Marnie's imagination. Marnie later admits to Christy that she brought the weapon to Roni's apartment, but could not bring herself to do it. This confession makes Christy nervous, but Christy tries to comfort her and stop her from acting on her emotions. The day before the murder, she asked Christy to read her fortune to see if she would succeed in killing Roni. As an experienced tarot reader, Christy laid out the cards, and the one Marnie chose suggested success. Obsessed with the idea of killing Roni, the pregnant woman, Marnie ignored Christy's pleas and remained determined to carry out her plan. Christy later contacted Marnie, and they arranged to meet. During their conversation, Christy secretly wore a recording device, and the recording was later used as evidence. At this meeting, Marnie confessed to killing Roni, explaining the details of the crime. She revealed that she had disguised herself by wearing a wig, dark makeup, and gloves to avoid leaving any evidence. Marnie said she knocked on Roni's apartment door, and when Roni opened it, she drew her weapon and entered the house. She acted quickly, attacked Roni before Roni could scream. She admitted to being cautious, ensuring she didn't touch anything in the apartment and keeping her gloves on to avoid leaving traces. Marnie also described renting a black car, using a disposable phone, and then throw away the murder weapon, wig, gloves, and clothing in separate trash bins. She planned the murder meticulously so that it could not be detected, but Christy would testify against her. The recorded conversation became the prosecution's most compelling piece of evidence during the trial. The police investigation showed that Marnie's work computer had directions to Roni's house saved. They also confirmed that she rented a black Volkswagen on October 3. The vehicle's route was tracked from the rental location to Ronnie's apartment and back. However, the defense argued that there was no physical evidence that Marnie was at the scene, including DNA, fingerprints, or phone records. The case was based largely on circumstantial evidence in Christie's testimony. The defense wanted to discredit Christie by emphasizing her dubious background. They revealed that she had once claimed to be a psychic in the U.S. Army and said she was the sole survivor of a mission in the Middle East. However, it was later proven that she had fabricated her military service and had never even been in the Middle East. She had lied to enhance her qualifications for the role. The defense argued that Christie's testimony was unreliable and accused the police of falsely assigning blame to Marnie for the murder. The defense argued that there was no concrete evidence against Marnie, other than circumstantial evidence and recordings made under duress. The lawyer argued that Marnie confessed out of fear and in an attempt to protect her children, as her eldest son was under suspicion. Furthermore, an unidentified fingerprint was discovered on the door handle of Ronnie's apartment. The lawyer emphasized that the fingerprint did not belong to Marnie and that the police had failed to determine who it belonged to. The prosecutor acknowledged the existence of the fingerprint, confirming it was not in any database. However, they contended that the print could have been left by anyone passing by and was not necessarily linked to the crime. Marnie was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder for killing Ronnie Reuter and Ronnie's unborn child. She received 2 life sentences without parole. She and her lawyers opposed the sentence and filed an appeal, but it was denied. Marnie later claimed that she deliberately confessed to the murder to Christie to protect her son and stop people from bothering her. However, no one believed her explanation. Why would she include so many specific details about the murder if they weren't true? This makes no sense. The defense team argued that the black car seen on surveillance footage was not the Volkswagen that Marnie had rented. They also stated that a man had informed the police he had stolen Marnie's gun months before the murder, meaning she did not possess a gun at the time. Additionally, the murder weapon was never recovered at the crime scene. Fingerprints belonging to someone else were found, and they did not match Marnie's or any family member's fingerprints. The lawyer pointed out that male DNA was discovered on the cartridges at the crime scene, but it did not match Marnie's DNA and instead belonged to an unidentified man. The defense stressed that forensic analysis of the shooting angle indicated the attacker was taller than Marnie. Crucially, new CCTV footage from a hair salon showed Sean arriving for a haircut much later than he had claimed during police questioning. The footage revealed that he arrived at 10 a.m. on the day of Ronnie's murder, and she was killed before 8 a.m. Sean had previously told police he slept until 9:15 a.m. that morning, but evidence showed he had already sent a message to Ronnie and made several phone calls by 8:50 a.m. This video exposed inconsistencies in Sean's timeline, suggesting he could have had enough time to commit the murder. While the defense suspects Sean of being the perpetrator, they have not yet succeeded in having the case reopened. Marnie is still in prison and maintains her innocence. Sean, a former Chicago Bears player, played for the team for 11 seasons from 1984 to 1994, including their Super Bowl win in 1985. Having overcome his struggles in the United States, he now lives in London, United Kingdom, where he works as an NFL analyst for Sky Sports, a British sports channel, and regularly shares his expert analysis on weekly broadcasts. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carrie Ann Jopek. Carrie Ann Jopek was born on August 17, 1968, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a large city with a population of over 500,000. Her parents, Carolyn and Robert, divorced when she was very young. Shortly after, her mother remarried a man named Frederick Toussaint. The family lived in downtown Milwaukee along with 2 daughters, the youngest of whom was named Maggie. Carrie grew up in a loving family and had a close relationship with Frederick, whom she considered her biological father. She did not know of her biological father's existence, as he did not communicate with her. Carrie was well educated and had everything she needed. She was friendly and kind, which helped her make many friends, including older teenagers. However, during her teenage years, Carrie's personality began to change, leading to conflicts with her mother and stepfather. When she discovered that Frederick was not her biological father, she became very angry with her parents. She often used this information against him in arguments. Some relatives described Carrie as stubborn, while others thought she was simply going through a challenging period in her life, especially since she was only 13 years old at the time. On March 15, 1982, Carrie was allowed by her parents to stay overnight at her friend Marsh's house. Since both girls were in 7th grade, they went to school together the next morning, March 16. However, because they were in different classes, they could only see each other at lunchtime. Carrie was upset because her teacher had reprimanded her for arguing with another student who had spilled paint on her. The teacher then contacted Carrie's parents to report Carrie's behavior and truancy. The teachers suggested that Carrie's mother pick her up after school to discuss her actions. However, Carrie's house was close enough to the school, so her mother allowed Carrie to walk home by herself. Carrie was upset. She knew her mother and stepfather would probably scold her, so she didn't want to go home. Her friend comforted her, and they parted ways after school. Although reluctant, Carrie had to go home because she lived only a few blocks from school. Normally, it would only take her 3 minutes to walk home, but that day, she never returned. It is important to note that the 1980s in America were generally a safe time. People trusted each other, and crime rates were low compared to today. Additionally, the incident occurred in a crowded area where everyone knew each other, so no one thought it was strange for a 13-year-old girl to walk home from school alone. Carrie did not come home. Carolyn waited for her at home and then went out to look for her. Carolyn thought that Carrie had stopped to visit a friend on the way home and would be back soon. It is important to note that they could not contact Carrie because cell phones had not yet been invented. As the night wore on, Carolyn grew increasingly concerned. She set out again to look for her daughter. First, she went to see Carrie's best friend, Robin, who lived across the street. Unfortunately, no one in Robin's house had seen or heard from Carrie since school ended. Next, Carolyn contacted Marsh, who had spent the night with Carrie. However, Marsh did not see Carrie after she left. Eager to help, Carrie's friends joined the search and began checking with neighbors and classmates who might have seen her after school, but no one had any information. By 11 p.m., a search party of local volunteers who knew the family was formed. Many neighbors, friends, and acquaintances took to the streets to patrol the area and ask questions. Unfortunately, they could not find any information about the Carrie. They decided to wait for Carrie until the next morning. On March 17, when the girl still had not returned home, Carolyn went to the police station to report her missing. By then, the Carrie had been missing for almost a day, prompting police to act quickly, as the situation could be serious. Initially, the primary theory was that Carrie had run away, as she was known to be a difficult teenager who sometimes skipped classes and often spent the night at friends' houses. Police thought that Carrie was simply spending time with friends. However, after interviewing all her friends, they realized this was not the case. None of them had seen Carrie after school, leading them to conclude that something must have happened to her on her way home. They then began questioning residents living along her route that day, but these inquiries yielded no useful information. None of the residents had seen Carrie or noticed anything unusual. The police discovered that Carrie had been upset with her family after learning that her stepfather was not her biological father. Police believed this revelation might have driven her to search for her biological father, whom she could have gone to see that day. By this time, a day had passed since Carrie left school, and there was still no news about her. The police located her biological father, Robert, who lived in a different area of Malak, hoping she might be with him. Unfortunately, when they contacted him, their hopes were dashed. Robert explained that he had been at work all day the previous day and had not seen Carrie. A thorough inspection was carried out at the house of the Carey. Police searched through all her belongings for clues, but found nothing significant. Consequently, the search for the missing person continued. A day after her disappearance, there was still hope that the teenager was alive. However, the critical window for finding a missing person is 48 hours, after which the chances of a successful rescue decrease significantly. Therefore, the police needed to act quickly. During the investigation, the police focused on Johns, who lived just a few houses away from Carey's family. John was 17 at the time and had developed a close relationship with Carey. The police learned that he had a rebellious personality and a history of legal trouble, including convictions for petty theft and selling marijuana. Despite their 4-year age difference, John showed an interest in Carey, which raised concerns. The police decided to investigate further and brought John in for questioning. John adamantly denied any involvement in Carey's disappearance, claiming that he had not even seen her that day. The police were unable to gather any useful information during their questioning, and there was no solid evidence against John. As a result, he was released. The police then turned their attention to her stepfather, Frederick. In these cases, the perpetrator was often someone close to the victim, and cases involving stepfathers were not uncommon, which added to their interest in him. The police looked closely at her family, especially the relationship between Carey and Frederick. They discovered that the two had recently been fighting, a change from their previous relationship. Frederick attributed the turmoil to Carey's adolescence, believing that her hormones had made her more irritable and prone to anger over small matters. Despite this, he maintains that he would never harm her. An anonymous witness reported some details regarding her stepfather, Frederick. They mentioned that the day after Carey went missing, Frederick poured a new concrete slab in the backyard. The witness suggested that this may have been Frederick's way of disposing of the body by burying it underneath the concrete slab. This information seems suspicious and should be investigated. The concrete slab was examined using ground-penetrating radar, and no suspicious voids were detected. When the area beneath the slab was excavated, it was found to be empty. The yard was well maintained, showing no signs of recent digging. The police decided to conduct a second round of questioning with the Carey's friends, focusing on the possibility that she might have run away with a boyfriend. Although Carey never mentioned having a boyfriend to her parents, the police speculated that she may have kept this relationship secret. However, her friends firmly denied this possibility, insisting that Carey was not in a relationship with anyone. The police tried to collect evidence, but it is important to note that forensic science in the 1980s was not as advanced as it is today. At that time, there was no DNA testing, trackable cell phones, cameras, or GPS technology. This made finding evidence more difficult. As a result, the police could not find any clues. Carey seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Lack of evidence then caused the case to stall. The police did not have a strong motive for Carey's abduction, nor could they find a suspect. To raise public awareness of their daughter's disappearance, Carey's parents turned to the media for help. They appealed to anyone with information about Carey to come forward, but still, no leads came. The investigation was stalled due to lack of evidence. More than a year later, on September 2, 1983, a mysterious body was found in the John family home. The contractor was repairing the back porch. He leveled the ground and dug up a significant amount of dirt. While doing so, he noticed a foul odor coming from a pile of disturbed dirt. Upon inspection, he discovered human remains. The contractor immediately called the police. Everyone believed the remains to be those of Carey. The body was then subjected to dental records analysis to determine the identity of the remains. All members of John's family were questioned. During his police interview, John denied any involvement and requested a lawyer. A year earlier, the police had lacked substantial evidence to charge or detain him, so they released him but continued to view him as a suspect. The remaining members of John's family have denied any involvement in the murder. The medical examiner investigated Carey's cause of death and discovered severe injuries to her head and neck. She had significant internal bleeding, with lacerations on her left side. These injuries suggested that she had been attacked by someone else, leading to the case being classified as a homicide. Unfortunately, the autopsy was unable to provide enough information to determine whether rape had occurred. Carrie's body was found in her friend John's backyard, but this does not mean that he was responsible for her death or that he buried her there. Witnesses said that on the day she disappeared, there was a party at John's house. Police had to piece together the case from scratch, with few clues to follow. And so much time had passed since the party that it was difficult for those who were there to remember what happened. Several teenagers were interviewed about the party at John's house. Some claimed they were there but could not remember any details. Others said they had only heard about the party and were not actually there. John claimed he did not organize any events that day, and police found no evidence to contradict his statement. 4 days after Carrie's body was discovered, police received a new lead. A witness identified Jose Ferreira, a 16-year-old boy who lived next door to Carrie. He was seen in John's backyard when Carrie's body was discovered, which raised some suspicion. The police decided to pursue the lead and invited Jose to the police station for questioning. Jose denied any involvement in Carrie's death or disappearance. Jose knew her well and was friends with her, so he was very upset when he discovered her body in the backyard. He claimed that he did it to honor his old friend. Jose's story seemed credible. He was also questioned about a party at John's house on the day Carrie went missing, but he said it never happened. The police had no evidence against Jose, so they had to release him after questioning. Friends described Jose as friendly and cheerful, and no one believed he would hurt Carrie. They spent a lot of time together and were close friends. The investigation continued, but no leads were found. The case hit a dead end. It wasn't until 33 years after Carrie's murder that the investigation made any progress. On October 11, 2015, a man contacted a journalist to confess to the murder. His name was Jose Ferreira. In addition to contacting the journalist, he called the hotline and admitted to killing 13-year-old Carrie Ann Jopek years earlier. He also confessed to his wife about the crime. Journalists and switchboard operators were stunned by his confession and immediately notified the police. At the same time, Jose's wife learned of his crimes and went to the nearest police station to report him. Jose was 50 years old at the time. The police reviewed the case file. Despite Jose's confession, the police were in no hurry to arrest him. 2 days after his telephone confession, Jose turned himself into the police station and gave a detailed account of the events of 33 years ago. His sudden actions and confession were because he believed it would prevent his wife from getting a divorce. This statement puzzled the police. Jose said that on the day of the incident. Carrie returned home from school. She noticed a party going on at John's house. She wanted to avoid going home where she would face punishment, so she decided to join the party. At the party, she met Jose and they engaged in conversation. Then they went down to the basement together to find some wine. On the way down to the basement, he kissed her and she agreed. As they walked down the stairs to the basement, Carrie suddenly changed her mind and said she wanted to leave. In a fit of rage, he pushed her, causing her to lose her balance and fall down the stairs, resulting in a broken neck. In a moment of loss of control, he raped her, not knowing that she had died from the fall. His actions were classified as sexual assault and use of force. He defended himself by claiming that he had loved Carrie. He felt offended by her decision to leave, but he insisted that he did not want her to die. He panicked and dismissed the incident as an accident. Jose feared going to jail and ruining his life. He seized the opportunity during a lively party when no one noticed his presence in the basement. He needed to dispose of the body quickly to avoid being seen. Jose hid the body, and when night fell, he took a shovel and dragged Carrie into the backyard. In the dark, he quietly dug a hole and buried her. He believed that his plan had gone smoothly and that no one had seen him. However, the police were baffled by his story. They found it hard to believe that at such a crowded party, no one had noticed them together, and no one had noticed him digging the hole and burying Carrie. The police suspected that Jose might have had an accomplice, but he adamantly denied that anyone else was involved. Carrie's family said that Jose often visited them and was present at the farewell and burial. Carrie's mother remembered that Jose had mentioned being haunted by Carrie's ghost, which surprised them, but they ignored it at the time. While this could have been a warning sign, no one thought that the killer could be one of the friendly people in the neighborhood. Jose later revealed that Carrie's spirit had haunted him for years, making it impossible for him to live a normal life. This ultimately contributed to his decision to confess to the crime to ease his conscience. During the trial, the prosecutor asked for Jose to be convicted of second-degree murder. The defense argued that the case was manslaughter. Initially, bail was set at $200,000, but Jose then began to recant his confession. The prosecution's case relied heavily on Jose's confession. It would have been difficult to convince the jury of his guilt without any evidence. Ultimately, the prosecution offered a plea deal. In March 2017, Jose Ferreira agreed to plead guilty to sexually assaulting Carrie, which reduced his prison sentence to 7 years. The final sentence was handed down 35 years after Carrie was murdered. In 2022, Jose was released from prison and moved to the nearby town of Glendale, Wisconsin. He was listed in a police database as a potential sex offender and placed on supervision. Carrie's family expressed outrage that the man who murdered and raped a 13-year-old girl was released after only 7 years. He now lives a quiet life, as if nothing had happened, and as if he had not taken an innocent life. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Heather Rich. We all experience youthful adventures, a rebellious spirit, and the transition into adulthood. However, for some, adolescence can become perilous. In the remote southern region of Oklahoma, USA, lies a quiet town named Waurika. This small community has around 2,000 residents, where everyone knows one another, and life is calm and steady. In the fall of 1996, the Rich family lived in Oklahoma. Mom Gail, Dad Dwayne Rich, and their 4 children, 3 boys, and a girl named Heather. At the time, Heather was a sophomore in high school. She was an excellent student and cheerleader, known for her beauty and ability to attract attention. Heather was kind, but had a rebellious streak in her teenage years. On the evening of October 2, 1996, an argument broke out between Gail and Heather. They discussed a phone bill that cost the family $300, which upset Gail's mother, who disapproved of Heather's spending habits. Dwayne, the father, on the other hand, remained calm about the situation. Gail explained to Heather that due to the family's difficult financial situation, she could not afford to pay the large monthly bills. Dwayne, an electrician, had suffered severe burns from a transformer explosion and required extensive medical care and skin grafts. He was unable to work and support the family, forcing Gail to take on additional work to make ends meet. Every dollar was important, especially since Dwayne was about to undergo expensive surgery. Gail wanted Heather to learn the value of money and the importance of being self-sufficient, but Heather struggled with this, leading to a serious argument between them. After things calmed down, Heather went to bed. She stopped by the living room to say goodnight to her father, but walked past her mother in silence to express her resentment. The next morning, October 3, Gail woke everyone up for breakfast, as was their usual routine. However, Heather did not come down for breakfast. Gail believed that it was because Heather was angry due to the events of the previous night. Gail hoped that when Heather was hungry, she would come down to eat. But after a while, Heather still did not appear. Gail went up to check on her in her room. Gail was surprised to find the room empty. At that time, cell phones were not common, and Heather did not have a phone. Worried, her parents called one of Heather's friends, but no one knew where she was. This behavior was unusual for Heather. She had never run away before and didn't have any mental health issues. She always took care of her appearance and wouldn't leave the house for long without changing clothes or doing her makeup. With all her belongings still at home, Worried Gail and Dwayne immediately went to the sheriff's department in Wow to report their daughter missing. Gail explains their argument from the previous day, when Gail expressed her frustration over the large phone bill, which was a significant burden on the family, and Heather appeared stubborn and determined not to admit her mistake. The sheriff tried to reassure the parents by comparing the situation to a typical teenage runaway, especially after an argument with her mother. However, this behavior was unusual for Heather, who usually tried to find a compromise even after a disagreement. The sheriff explained that most runaways returned home after a period of time. They suggested to the parents that Heather might have returned while they were at the sheriff's office. The police told Gail and Dwayne that Heather would need to be missing for at least a day before they could officially declare her missing. Since that time had not passed, the police could not accept their report. Frustrated and worried, Gail and Dwayne believed that something was wrong and that their daughter was in danger. They began searching all over town, starting with Heather's closest friends. One of these friends was Randy Wood, a 17-year-old boy who was the captain of the school's football team. He had dated Heather, but they had quickly broken up and agreed to remain friends. Importantly, he was one of the boys responsible for Heather's large phone bill. When asked about Heather's whereabouts, Randy said that he did not know where Heather was or what had happened to her. Gail then decided to contact another friend of Heather's, a 17-year-old high school student named Joshua Luke Bagwell, whom Heather had just started dating. When Gail called, Joshua's grandmother answered and said that he was resting after a party. She wanted to let him sleep and refused to wake him up to take the call. Joshua's grandmother said she was cleaning out the trailer in their yard where the school children had played the night before. When the mother asked about her daughter's disappearance, she said she didn't know. Relatives then searched the area for any sign of Heather. After a day of unsuccessful searching, her parents returned to the police station, and eventually the police joined the search effort. By October 10, a week after the search began, no useful information about Heather had been found. Given the amount of time that had passed, few people still held out hope of finding her alive. When searchers reached the area near the Texas border, a body was found floating face down, partially submerged in muddy water. Observers from a bridge noticed that the body was covered in mud, making it difficult to see in the murky water, as if someone had deliberately obscured it. When a diver finally recovered the body and brought it to shore, it was observed that the body had been severely mutilated, with multiple gunshot wounds. A forensic examination was conducted. Experts later determined that the victim had been shot 9 times at close range. The condition of the body was horrific, with many serious cuts. During this time, there was only one missing person in the area, so Heather's parents were asked to identify the body. They only recognized their daughter through the ring on her finger, an engraved piece of jewelry that her mother had given her. Later, dental records confirmed that it was indeed Heather's body. The news of her death quickly became the talk of the town the next day. Within hours, the entire village knew about the case. Randy Wood also heard the shocking news that same day. It just so happened that Randy had been crowned king of several football seasons that day. It was expected that there would be a big celebration after the game. However, Randy was deeply affected by what had happened to his ex-girlfriend Heather. He then went to the bridge and stared at the spot where Heather's body was found for a long time. In fact, he knew more about the situation than he had shared with Heather's parents. The investigation quickly led the police to Randy and some of his friends. One of them is the son of wealthy parents. The second is the best football player in school and captain of the team. The third is an ambitious criminal from the streets. As soon as the police got involved in the case, they spoke to Heather's parents. By that time, Gail had contacted several of Heather's friends and acquaintances. Gail became suspicious of 2 young men: Heather's ex-boyfriend, 17-year-old Randy Wood, and her current boyfriend, Joshua Luke Bagwell, who slept after a party and did not answer Gail's phone calls. She believed they were hiding something. These high school students appeared to be reciting rehearsed answers, and when pressed with further questions, they struggled to answer. Their behavior was quite tense. Gail believes that Randy and Joshua have more information than they are admitting. While talking to Heather's classmates and friends, the police have gathered many clues that Joshua and Randy know important details. And they should assist the police in uncovering what happened on that tragic night when Heather left home after an argument with her mother. Heather's best friend told her that Heather was planning to attend a party that night to meet her boyfriend, Joshua. Even though her parents had forbidden her from leaving the house after dark, she decided to sneak out. After her parents fell asleep, she climbed out of the window around 11 p.m. At the party, she was supposed to meet Joshua and Randy. Joshua came from a wealthy family and always arrived in fancy cars and dressed better than his peers. Randy comes from a humble family, but his athletic talents make him as popular as his wealthy friend Joshua. Randy is an attractive young man who is admired for his ability to play football at a professional level. Randy has earned the position of captain of the team through his skills and is recognized as the best player in town. Randy and Joshua are close friends. They often spend weekends driving Joshua's car along country roads. They often hang out with girls and drink frequently and smoke occasionally. There were few places for teenagers to hang out in the city, so they found their own ways to have fun. Heather, along with a friend, experimented with drinking and hanging out with popular boys. The night before she disappeared, she left home to spend time with them. On September 27, 1996, just 5 days before Heather went missing, Heather and another cheerleader were found in the hallway of the stadium with marijuana and smoking paraphernalia. It was also revealed that Heather had been drinking alcohol. As a result, she was suspended from school for 3 days, and her parents learned about this from her teacher. They were upset, as they never expected their 16-year-old daughter to engage in such dangerous behavior. Heather explained that curiosity led her to try these substances. She promised her parents that she would stop. Her parents became increasingly concerned about why she had chosen this path, as she was an excellent student and athlete. Although her parents believed her promise to quit, they found it difficult to confirm whether she was telling the truth. Bad habits may have played a direct role in her death. Police focused on Joshua and Randy to uncover the events at the party before Heather disappeared. Randy said he and Joshua had been in a trailer behind Joshua's house, where they spent the evening playing and drinking. However, both insisted they had not seen Heather that night, which raised the police's suspicions. The two young men told their stories in identical, almost rehearsed ways, they showing little emotion. This behavior led police to suspect that the teens were not telling the truth. At this stage, the police lacked evidence linking Joshua and Randy to the crime. However, their unusual behavior raised suspicions of their involvement. As a result, both young men became prime suspects, prompting a closer look at their backgrounds, their connection to Heather, and the events of that night's party. The autopsy revealed new insights, particularly regarding the number of shots fired at Heather. Remarkably, even police handguns typically only held 8 rounds. This begs the question, why reload the gun to fire another shot when the person was clearly dead? The second notable detail was the type of ammunition used to kill Heather. The killer chose Winchester double-shot. These bullets were quite rare and could only be purchased from one store in the city. Police checked the store's receipts and discovered that just before the murder, only one person had purchased this type of ammunition. The seller identified the buyer as Joshua in photos provided by the police. He came into the store and bought a whole box of 20 bullets. The seller also mentioned that Joshua was with another person. This person was not Randy, but Joshua's close friend, Curtis Allen Gamble, who was known to the police. He had a history of legal trouble, including multiple arrests. Despite his young age, Curtis had spent much of his life in juvenile facilities. He had a troubled past, having been arrested for drunk driving and shooting at animals, and even passers-by. Curtis quickly became the prime suspect, as Joshua and Randy had no previous legal problems and were never considered aggressive or dangerous. On October 23, police went to Curtis's home in another city. Notably, just a short distance from his home was a bridge over the river where Heather's body was discovered. After police arrived and found Curtis was not home, they spoke with his grandmother. She shared information about her grandson and noted that Curtis was very familiar with the area of the neighboring city and frequently visited the bridge where Heather was found. She mentioned that she used to take him fishing at that location when he was a child. The next day, Curtis was arrested and taken to the Orica Sheriff's Office. The interrogation lasted over 8 hours, during which Curtis remained mostly silent but agreed to take a lie detector test. However, the most important information the police learned was that Curtis admitted to owning a Mossberg handgun. This type of handgun can use a special type of bullet. Police suspected that he may have owned the weapon used in the murder. Investigations revealed that Heather had been shot with this rare type of handgun. After they seized the weapon and conducted gun tests, experts confirmed that it was indeed the weapon used to kill Heather. When the police presented evidence linking Curtis to Heather's murder, the investigation took a significant break. Curtis broke down and told the police that his 2 friends, Randy and Joshua, were involved in the murder. Curtis then wrote a 1-page confession. The police were able to identify the killers. Randy and Joshua were then arrested and taken to the sheriff's department. There, the police presented Curtis's confession, in which Curtis was the one who wanted to kill Heather and that he initiated the attack. However, he was not the one who actually carried out the murder. According to Curtis, he gave Joshua his weapon and forced Joshua to shoot Heather. However, the police were skeptical of Curtis's confession, as Joshua did not fit the profile of a criminal. Joshua had no previous problems with the law, was known to be a model student, an excellent athlete, and was generally well-liked. The party took place in southern Oklahoma, while the murder took place in Texas. As a result, they had to appear in court in Texas, where the crime could result in the death penalty. After being pressured by the police, Randy finally spoke during a second interview. However, he denied any involvement in the murder, saying that Curtis committed the crime and that Joshua assisted him. Joshua, meanwhile, chose not to cooperate with the investigation. In October 1996, the police received 2 conflicting confessions. They decided to believe Randy's story, especially since he had passed a lie detector test. According to Randy, he had planned to go out drinking with his friends Curtis and Joshua that night. Randy later learned that Heather was supposed to be joining them. Heather knew Joshua and Randy but had never met Curtis, so she had no idea he could be dangerous. That night, everyone drank a lot of alcohol, and Heather gradually lost consciousness. In her drunken state, Curtis harassed her and tried to attack her. Although she could barely speak, Curtis was afraid that when she woke up, she would remember what had happened. Knowing that rape was a serious crime that could result in a prison sentence, Curtis suggested that Heather be eliminated to avoid consequences. Randy thought he was joking, but he was serious. Curtis took a handgun from his car and aimed it at everyone present. Joshua and Randy understood the danger they were in, so they chose not to resist. They put the intoxicated Heather in the trunk of Joshua's car and drove towards Curtis's house. Before they arrived, Curtis led them across a bridge where Heather's body was later discovered. Curtis ordered the car to stop in the middle of the bridge and told them to pull Heather out of the trunk and place her near the railing. Fearing for their own safety, Joshua and Randy complied, but Heather was too intoxicated to stand. They left her on the ground. Curtis approached Heather and began shooting at close range. Randy saw a large hole appear in Heather's skull and instinctively covered his eyes, not wanting to see any more. Curtis unloaded all his bullets on her. Curtis and Joshua then dumped her off the bridge and drove away. Randy said they were horrified by what they had just witnessed and the extent of the cruelty Curtis had inflicted on Heather. They decided to remain silent out of fear for their own lives. In October 1996, Randy Wood, Joshua Luke Bagwell, and Curtis Allen Gamble were charged with the kidnapping and murder of 16-year-old Heather. Of the three, Joshua was the most difficult to deal with because he would not confess, remained silent, and there was virtually no evidence against him. The prosecutor had to rely on the testimony of Randy and Curtis, but their testimony was inconsistent. To resolve this problem, the prosecutor offered Randy a deal. He had to testify against Joshua in exchange for life imprisonment with the possibility of parole in 30 years. Randy quickly accepted the offer. On October 15, Curtis agreed to a plea deal that could have resulted in life imprisonment without parole. However, while in prison awaiting trial, Curtis assaulted a security guard, knocking him down and attempting to choke him before other guards intervened. Nearly a year and a half after Heather's death. In February 1998, Joshua's trial began. The defense made numerous attempts to justify the actions of those involved in the crime. The attorneys sought to discredit Heather by portraying her as an alcoholic and a womanizer, claiming that she had an inappropriate relationship with Curtis and that she had begun to threaten others. They argued that this behavior motivated Curtis to choose to eliminate her. Heather's parents defended their daughter, insisting that Heather was a talented athlete and a good person. She accidentally went with a bad group of friends and met a criminal. The floor was unexpectedly given to Curtis, he reiterating his claim that Joshua had nothing to do with the crime and had no knowledge of the planned murder. He claimed that Randy was the one who shot Heather. In a surprising turn of events, Randy refused to take the plea deal. He did not want his confession to be seen as an attempt to save himself and put others at risk. In court, he stated that he wanted to seek justice for Heather, despite his attorney advising him not to. Although this noble choice put him at risk of the death penalty, it left a strong impression on Heather's parents, who later met with Randy in person to discuss the situation. On February 14, Randy took the stand before the jury, sharing his account of the tragic events of that night, and the jury believed him completely. Randy described how Joshua had participated in Heather's murder along with Curtis, and also detailed Curtis's role in covering up the crime. That day, Curtis was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder, resulting in a sentence of life in prison plus 99 years. On May 8, Heather's and Randy's parents met during a live broadcast. Despite their deep sorrow over their loss, they were struck by the honesty of Randy and the genuine remorse he showed. On August 7, 1998, Randy Wood's trial ended, and he was found guilty of murdering the Heather, receiving a life sentence with the chance of parole after 40 years. Many people were upset by this verdict, as Randy was the only one who demonstrated remorse and risked his own safety to tell the truth. Many felt that he did not deserve such a severe punishment. Joshua was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was placed in the same correctional facility as Curtis. In January 2002, both men made a bold escape at night and evaded capture for 10 days while hiding in Texas, prompting a national alert. Eventually, they were caught and returned to prison,